Now being 7 o'clock, this House should resume the debate. I recognize the member from Saskatoon Willow Grove.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and thank you to my colleagues for that rousing welcome. We'll see if that if the speech finishes with that same rousing welcome. Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to say congratulations to the member for Saskatoon-Meewasin, who immediately preceded me in the debate, and it's always a special time when we are able to have our maiden speech, and I congratulate him on a job well done. Mr. Speaker, it's my honour, my joy, my privilege to respond to the speech from the throne. As many in this chamber know, I've been in political public service for a long time. Sometimes when I look in the mirror and I have a private discussion with myself, private discussions, as you know, Mr. Speaker, can be very challenging. So I ask myself this key question: have you given it your best shot to this beloved province of Saskatchewan? Would you be happier somewhere else? These questions bring a smile to my face in the mirror because I know the answer before I even ask them. I am part of Saskatchewan, and Saskatchewan is part of me. Like many of you here, it's my home, my haven, my joy. It is an honor to be here and my privilege to serve this province. Mr. Deputy Speaker, next week, November 5th to be exact, November 5th, 2003 was the day that I was elected to this chamber, and here we are, 19 years later. Hard to believe, but the years go by, but it is indeed a privilege each and every year. Yes, some say I'm getting looking younger and younger all the time. They will be, accolades will be accepted, that's for sure. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to thank of course, like all members do, their families for providing the opportunity for me to be here in this Legislative Assembly. To my wife Trish, and my son Carter, and my daughter Paige, thank you very much. Paige and Carter were 5 and 3 years old, I think, when I first started this legislative journey, and they certainly have matured into great young men, young women, and I want to thank Trish for all the support she gives me, and she's got her own career at St. Paul's Hospital Foundation and is enjoying that very much. Carter, our son, our oldest, is with Brian Mallard Wealth Management in Saskatoon and enjoying that very much. He recently became a homeowner, so he has all the joys and stress of that, but I think he's enjoying it, he and his girlfriend, very much. My daughter Paige lives in Hamilton, just convocated in June, has her undergrad degree, is working on graduate studies, and recently wrote the MCAT, the medical school entrance exam, so we've got our fingers crossed in that regard. Mr. Deputy Speaker, of course I want to thank the people of Saskatoon Willow Grove, the electors and all of the residents for returning me to this legislature each and every time, and now I'm just still trying to do my very, very best to help them. I want to thank also my CAs that helped me in various regards. Brianne Tupin is doing a very, very good job. She's there. She's the face of the office each and every day. Also to the other CAs, Jackie and David, who fill in from time to time. Thank you very much for all that you do for myself and for the constituents of Saskatoon Willow Grove. Also, I want to say thank you to my party executive, the people that help with the Saskatoon Willow Grove Sask Party Association. Those are volunteers that put in a lot of time, and I want to thank people like Wade McBain, who's the president, and Brad Sylvester, who many know has been there for a long time. So thank you very much to all of them. Mr. Deputy Speaker, as I listened to our Lieutenant Governor deliver the throne speech, I felt a quiver of strong emotion. As all of you here today are aware, I'm not given to emotional display very often. I try to be like our Saskatchewan mallard ducks, serene on the surface, but paddling with fervor underneath, Mr. Speaker. So this strong emotion I felt was based on 3 things in the text. First and foremost, Mr. Deputy Speaker, was my belief that Her Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II, would have been so very proud to be represented by Honourable Russ Marasti. He, like the Queen, is the essence of strength and service, strong, earnest, capable, and compassionate. He defines Saskatchewan, and Saskatchewan defines him. He deserves the title Honourable. Our new King, Charles III, who has shown that public service can wear many different mantles, will enjoy the same loyalty devoted to his beloved mother. We in this province and great country will continue to enjoy and thrive from the Westminster system of government, whose legacy gives the strong foundation on which we can build our future. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, I was moved by the spirit of service contained in the speech from the throne, growth that works for everyone. Growth is the imperative of our times, yet the theme also emphasizes that in our wonderful province, every person matters. If democracy is to persevere, it must value the lives, the talents, the hopes, the dreams of everyone. We must love locally, but we must respect globally, as our past Queen did. Wherever she went, she raised the bar of tolerance, truth, and tribute. She and her 7 decades partner, Prince Philip, were truly something to behold and something to follow. We mourn their passing, but honor their example. As a mother, the Queen left a huge legacy for her son, Charles, to follow. May I say, Mr. Speaker, that I'm a great fan of mothers. My mom, Lucy, was my crutch, my forever fan, and my ferocious defender. Like all mothers, she simply could not understand how anyone could not vote for her son. I'm sure many of my colleagues in this chamber have experienced that same devotion. I admire mothers particularly, though, because they so often are the ones that pass on the legacy of their family, their community, and their province, the legacy upon which our future will rest. Let's consider, Mr. Speaker, the richness of our achievements in Saskatchewan. As we plan our future growth, we can learn from the past. Let me quote from the jacket of this must-read book, A People's Architectural History of Saskatchewan by local author Joe Rolko. It states, in honor of Saskatchewan's centennial, the Saskatchewan Architectural Society worked in collaboration with thousands of persons across the province to assemble a selection of the province's built heritage that have made a difference to the lives of residents in order to provide a unique glimpse into the tightly woven fabric of prairie society and important insights into Saskatchewan's growth over 100 years. I urge you to read the book and to believe in it. It shows our legacy to lead. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we may be a landlocked province, but as the speech from the throne demonstrates, we trade freely with the best of them. The Northern Lights continue to reflect our vision. Thirdly, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I am moved by the compassion explicit in the throne speech, especially in the light of our James Smith Cree Nation, that recent tragedy. The memory of this horror will haunt us for decades. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is a reminder to each of us in this chamber that an assault on one of us is an assault on all of us. The peace of 2 communities and the peace of this province were shattered by this attack. The tragedy is also a reminder that compassion without action is not enough. My ancestors arrived to this province in the 1890s in a frigid December. They only survived their first winter because of their Indigenous neighbours. They took action and shared their limited food reserves with the new settlers. That is why I'm so pleased to see the many provisions in the throne speech for the advancement of our Indigenous peoples in education, healthcare, and in industry. And there is a compassion which will benefit all of the people of the province in many more of the provisions in the speech from the throne. I think especially of the support for those most vulnerable through the affordability provisions and other measures targeted specifically to those who need the help the most. That compassion will be carried by the growth in our industrial sector, one whose time has come. Food, fuel, and fertilizer, says the speech from the throne, to describe Saskatchewan's contribution to the world. Like so many of us, I like to eat too. However, there is little humor in the world starving millions, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The United Nations call the food crisis an unprecedented horror. It is a horror that we in this province are in a position to overcome. In a recent Canadian Press comprehensive business report entitled "Savior for the World," Saskatchewan fills resource gaps caused by the war in Ukraine. The author points out that Saskatchewan, with its stable and established resource and agriculture sector, has found itself in a position to help fill the global gap caused by the war. The prairies are big players in global markets for these things, said Ellen Goddard, an agricultural economist and professor emeritus at the University of Saskatchewan. The world needs the things that the prairies are producing. So in many ways, she said, the prairies are like a savior to the world. Mr. Deputy Speaker, very, very bold statement indeed. The prairies are like a savior to the world. But indeed, it is very, very, very thoughtful. Yet, as Professor Goddard also points out, for the majority of Canadians, the actual contribution that the Canadian prairies make to global markets is not very well understood at the best of times. That is why protecting and promoting our food, fuel, and fertilizer production, as outlined constantly in the throne speech, has my full support. And it is incumbent upon all of us to let the country know, to let the world know of this contribution that Saskatchewan makes each and every day. Mr. Speaker, the throne speech also commends Saskatchewan's ambitious and talented workforce. It also includes enhanced training in the trades, an area often underserved and often undervalued. Only recently has the need and value become so obvious to each of us. Yet we need the workers in every new field. As the world unravels, more and more migrants, immigrants, and refugees see our province as a beacon of hope. Over 2,000 able, willing, and hopeful Ukrainians have recently joined us. They come prepared to contribute to our growth as their forebears did many decades ago. Other groups are also prepared to join our provincial economy and communities. And this province, right from the very beginning, has been a community of communities. Years ago, the Bilingual and Bicultural Commission has needed an example for their French-English mandate. They made a special effort to visit my hometown of Blaine Lakes to learn how different ethnic groups from various backgrounds, Ukrainian, Doukhobor, French, English, and Aboriginal, all work together for the greater good of their area and for the province as a whole. They listed the result as the epitome of Canadian unity and typical of the communities here in Saskatchewan. That spirit of working together will inspire and build our growth through new people, new projects, and new prosperity. I want to enlarge upon the greater good, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and here I want to commend our leader, the Premier of Saskatchewan. As we all know, our Premier is a champion of business. He not only promotes it, but defines it as the key to a better future for the people of the province. He also walks the talk. Growth for the growth's sake is not his or our party's or our government's credo. Growth brings money and resources for developing better priority services. Services for everyone, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Healthcare, education, social services. The enhancement of many of those services is a major part of this throne speech. Whether it be the affordability initiative, additional addiction centres, buoyed-up educational resources, managing crime, and significantly increasing people's safety. Trades training in our universities and community colleges, support for innovation, a multitude of healthcare initiatives, or trade and development abroad. This is a summary of this very, very good throne speech, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And the money from the growth that we work so hard to see happen in our province is a key for a better future for all of us. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I see that in the in my own constituency, the constituency of Saskatoon-Willow Grove, one of the top 2 growth areas of the province, Mr. Speaker. Of course, with growth comes needs. On the day of the throne speech, I had participated in a meeting with the Minister of Education, with the Mayor of Saskatoon, with representatives of both our school boards, the YMCA, and the Home Builders Association. Mr. Speaker, the topic was the need for two new high schools in the Homewood sector of Saskatoon, near the Brighton area, an area of great growth in our province. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, what we were doing is talking about the vast resources that we have in the province and the ability of them to help us fulfill our needs. Make no mistake about it, 2 new high schools on the east side of Saskatoon is a top priority of our government, and it's a top need. But to be in a position to be able to start talking about it and to look at it, I think is something that is very important, and that's why it's so important for us to grow the economy, to grow our resource sector so we have indeed these resources. Mr. Deputy Speaker, to me this is the future of Saskatchewan. Being able to bring our resources together, to look to the future, to identify our needs, and to walk forward. We recognize our past, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We are secure in the present because of the good management of the Premier and the Cabinet and the government, not without mistakes. We were the first to admit that we've made mistakes along the way, but very quick to correct those mistakes and very much able to say that we build on those that have come before us, but we look to the future. So, Mr. Speaker, we recognize our past, we are secure in the present, and make no mistake, we are very excited about the future here in Saskatchewan. When I hear about tens of thousands of more people coming to my area, coming to Saskatoon, coming to Saskatchewan, you can't help but get excited about it. We know that our best days are ahead of us, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and for this, I am again very thankful for the opportunity to stand in my place, I think for the 19th time to respond to the speech from the throne and to take this very seriously, to say that it's an opportunity, again, to reflect on the past, to talk about our very secure future, but most importantly, to look towards what's coming at us. So, again, thank you to colleagues for listening. Mr. Speaker, I will certainly be supporting the motion and defeating the weak amendment that members opposite have forward. So, again, thank you for the opportunity, and I'll take my place.
I recognize the member from Arm River.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's an absolute pleasure and privilege to be able to share some thoughts here this evening, to provide some remarks regarding the speech from the throne, which we heard read by our Lieutenant Governor here last week. As was done by the Lieutenant Governor, I would like to do the same, and I would like to begin by recognizing and offering my condolences in regard to the tragedies that occurred on the James Smith Cree Nation and community of Weldon, and on the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. Both brought great sadness to our province. Although this is the third time that I've stood in my place and delivered a reply to the throne speech, the newness of the occasion has not lost its shine, nor has the honor of the occasion lost its significance. Mr. Speaker, in a prior speech, in fact, I think it was one of my first speeches that I gave in this chamber, I made a statement, something to the effect of economic growth for the sake of economic growth. Well, it's not a goal, that's a boast. It's what you do with that economic growth that makes all the difference. And the theme of this year's throne speech, growth that works for everyone, speaks directly to the heart and soul of that sentiment. The sentiment that the strength of our economy places us in a position to deliver growth that benefits all people of Saskatchewan. It gives us the ability to build schools, hospitals, urgent care centres, Mr. Speaker. It allows us to recruit, incentivize, train, and retain additional healthcare professionals. The mix of additional healthcare professionals, Mr. Speaker, will strengthen our long-term care facilities, strengthen our emergency rooms, strengthen our rural hospitals, and our operating rooms. It will support efforts to reduce surgical wait times, to meet the aggressive surgical targets that we've set. That is to perform the highest number of surgeries ever performed in the history of this province, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, economic growth allows us to better connect the people of the province together with each other and the entire world by improving our transportation infrastructure and our technological infrastructure. This same growth and prosperity afford us the ability to make our families and communities safer through enhancements to crime reduction teams, warrant enforcement suppression teams, and by introducing a new Saskatchewan Marshal Service. Mr. Speaker, I grew up in a small-town Saskatchewan world where you left the front door unlocked most times. And quite honestly, the grain truck, well, it probably had the keys left inside as well. This is the world that I hope for my children and my grandchildren. Growth also, Mr. Speaker, allows us to better care for those most vulnerable in our society. It enhances our efforts to combat homelessness. It allows us to better support our seniors, that is our uncles, our aunts, our parents, our grandparents, our neighbours, to improve their quality of life. This same growth that works for everyone, Mr. Speaker, it is not an ideal or a vision. It is a reality of what we are able to do with and for the people of Saskatchewan as a result of a strong economy. Yes, Mr. Speaker, our Saskatchewan economy is charging forward and indeed growing, but so too is the size of our Saskatchewan family. Prior to forming government in 2007, the very concept of a stable Saskatchewan population over 1 million citizens was an absurdity, was a far-fetched notion according to the government of the day. Now, Mr. Speaker, we sit on the precipice of 1.2 million people calling Saskatchewan home and are on track to achieve this and our growth plan of 1.4 million people by 2030. You see, Mr. Speaker, this government clearly understands the potential that this province has. Abundance of oil, gas, uranium to fuel the world, fertile lands for raising livestock, for growing crops to feed the world, an abundance of forests and a growing forestry sector to build and shelter the world, Mr. Speaker. And within our borders, we possess most of the elements on the periodic table, elements that are necessary for a world now and for the future. That said, Mr. Speaker, I would argue that our most important resource is and has always been our human resource. This is a resource that we most need in our province, and is the resource that sets us apart from others. That is our people. That's why, Mr. Speaker, when our population numbers from the second quarter of this year was referenced in this throne speech, I'll tell you, the little hairs on the back of my neck, they were raising up. To think, Mr. Speaker, 6,500 more people call Saskatchewan home now than did only a few short months ago. To place the significance of this number into perspective for a moment, if I can, actually to place it into an Arm River perspective, if I can, the growth that this province has seen, population-wise, in a few short months is the equivalent, Mr. Speaker, to adding another Davidson, another Outlook, another Crake, another Keniston, another Bethune, another Raymore, another Jansen, another Elbow, another Nokomis, another Hayward, another Hopefast, another Eyebrow, and, of course, another Chamberlain. To the map. The significance of this growth should not be lost in the numbers, though, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, these are people and families that, yes, fill jobs, but also fill ranks, and fill churches, and fill halls, and fill schools, Mr. Speaker, and they fill communities with life. And they also make up our Saskatchewan family, Mr. Speaker. Now, speaking of families, before I get too whisked away deeply into my remarks here this evening, I certainly would like to comment to my own family. Mr. Speaker, since last we were in this legislature, my family's gotten a little bit bigger. Well, in a couple of respects, I would say. Recently, added to my family are the amazing folks that work in my ministerial office here in this building. Emney, Jackson, Anshuman, and Morgan. It is an absolute pleasure working with these folks, and each one of them comes to work every day, bringing an absolute high degree of professionalism and dedication to the service of the people of this province. As for the constituency office, Mr. Speaker, my Davidson family, that is my two constituency assistants, Lavon Lake and Katie Vollmer, well, they make a tremendous team, Mr. Speaker. They are creative, they are dedicated, they are caring, they are hardworking, and they are generally tolerant of me. Generally tolerant of me. The constituents of Arm River are certainly well served by these two gems, Mr. Speaker. Now, speaking of Arm River, it is an absolute honor to represent the amazing people and amazing communities in my constituency of Arm River. Communities that have continued to open their doors to me and continue to inspire me with their spirit. Spirit that can be seen in its rodeos, its fairs, its parades, its concerts, and spirit that can be felt in fundraisers, ceremonies, and conversations in its coffee shops. You know, Mr. Speaker, before becoming elected into this office, I didn't realize that I had a passion for attending parades. It is one of the pure pleasures in life, I will tell you.
Collecting candy?
And I can see that my colleagues, certainly on this side, agree very much with what I'm saying here. They understand, too, the spirit of a parade, how good it feels when you're going down the street and you can interact with those folks, and it's a special moment, Mr. Speaker. And speaking of a special moment, Mr. Speaker, this summer I had the good fortune of being in a parade in Nokomis. And as we were lining up in the queue, and I had my float, which is our half-ton truck decorated, but my float driver, that would be my wife, and my two assistants, which would be my boys, were ready to go. We were waiting in the queue, and I saw a couple of entries ahead. There was an old original military Jeep, it looked like from the 1940s. So I was kind of interested, had a little bit of time. I went up there. And sitting in this Jeep, Mr. Speaker, was a gentleman who was just the biggest honor probably of maybe my life, actually, to meet this gentleman. I know that's big words, but Mr. Speaker, I will tell you, it was such an honor to meet Sir Arthur Ramshaw. Sir Arthur Ramshaw was well, he still is. I guess he's still 104. His birthday's February 22nd. Coming up here, he'll be 105 then, Mr. Speaker. He is a gentleman who has seen action in Dieppe. He has served this country well. He is someone who certainly is someone that I wanted my children to meet. So I quickly brought them up. We had a great conversation. He explained how he met his wife. And I may share that at some point in time here. But I'll tell you what, I guess the reason I'm telling you this, other than to tell you how much I love parades and the people you meet there, but the reason I'm telling you this is because, you know, when I think of growth that works for everyone, I think of people like Sir Arthur Ramshaw. I think of him. And I also think of the children in the child care facility that was just open here in Central Butte, in the Wishes and Wonders Child Care Center, all those little souls. I think of them. I also think of Sharon and her husband, who have the Chinese food restaurant 2 doors down from my office in Davidson. Can you imagine this, Mr. Speaker? This is a dream come true where I am. And those people work so hard, and they're putting 2 of their children through university right now, and they're just hardworking, honest people. I think of those people. Those are the people that are certainly on the forefront of my mind, but also people that I consider family now, people of Arm River. But actually, before I guess I get too much on a tangent here, Mr. Speaker, I should probably not commit the most major faux pas you can commit when giving a speech of this nature, which would be to forget to acknowledge your own family. So I should probably do that, my biological family. That is the people who have to admit to know me because we just have the same last name. Well, Mr. Speaker, this family of mine has not increased in numbers, and I know the member from Melfort would be very upset to hear that. We still only have 2 children. I know you have 6, but nonetheless, they've not increased in numbers, but they have increased in height. Except my wife, she stayed pretty much the same height over the course of these years, but same age as well. I'll throw that out there as well. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I would suggest, and maybe I'll be so bold right here, Mr. Speaker, to say, Terrell, my wife, she's maybe watching right now, I don't know, but it doesn't matter, this is recorded. So she, I declare, is the most beautiful woman in Saskatchewan. Yep, I just threw another gauntlet down to this house. But I'm telling you, I don't know how you could argue with that. I really don't. And I'll tell you, as last week when I sat and I listened to the member from Athabasca deliver his speech, and it was a great one, I'll tell you, I learned, though, something. I learned that this well-respected member and friend relies on his wife's assistance to write his speaking materials. He said it right here. Mr. Speaker, like many of my colleagues here on this side, I too was disappointed by that. I really was. I was disappointed that my wife doesn't help me. But while Terrell may not have played a role in writing any of this or any of my material for that matter, she is the greatest support in my life, and she is the glue that holds our family together, and don't know where I'd be without her. Well, as for our boys, Noah and Saul. Well, life is full steam ahead with these guys, Mr. Speaker. A couple of big firsts occurred in our family this summer. I officially had the dad experience, that being sitting in the passenger seat while Noah, complete with learner's license in hand, took the wheel. My goodness. In fact, Noah's first foray onto the open road of the highway, that being the number 11 highway, of course, it was certainly a memorable one. As we warmed up on a couple of back roads that particular day, it was a Sunday, we warmed up and I figured the time was right for us to head out, to strike out and hit the highway, number 11, near Craik, actually. And you know what, I'll be honest, I did notice it was a tad busier on the highway than it normally would be, but I had other things preoccupying my mind at that particular time, and so, in my full defense, I was a little oblivious to the sheer volume of traffic on that day, and then we started down the pavement, and quickly we were swarmed. We were swarmed by automobiles, in front of us, behind us, left of us, maybe even the right too, I don't know. We were swarmed. And then the cold pail of reality just swept right over me, and I realized it was a Rider game day. And so, I really don't remember the rest of the details of the 20-kilometer trip, but I do remember it was a steep learning curve for Noah and Dad too. And you know what? I will say though that I'll consult the rider schedule after this, and and I did actually, and I guess the season's over, and maybe that's a good thing for me, take him out on the road. But I will say that as a dad with a son who's going to be on the road solo, I'll tell you, I have a different perspective of how important it is that we stay committed to that 10,000 kilometers of roads that we're going to build and upgrade in this province and make safer for certainly my son, but other sons and parents and family members and neighbors, everyone in Saskatchewan. I certainly know that's an important goal. Mr. Speaker, as for Saul, he's now officially a man of high school. This is quite a deal around our house. He is also officially the tallest member of our family. He's nipped me by just a little bit here. And I'll be honest, if he tried, if he really put his mind to it, he probably could outgrow a mustache. Out-Movember his dad. I think he's got it in him, I really do. Or maybe I don't have it in me, that's just the problem. This past Wednesday, following the speech from the throne, Elder Felix made a comment that very much resonated with me, Mr. Speaker. He said that it's Thanksgiving every day. It's with that spirit of gratitude and thanksgiving I certainly try to live each day, and I certainly am eternally grateful and thankful for Terrell, Noah, and Saul. Mr. Speaker, when you hear of tragedy like that which played out in the James Smith Cree Nation in the community of Weldon, it is heartbreaking, and like so many others have done, I once again offer my sincerest condolences to the families and the communities touched by this awful circumstance. I don't think I'm alone in saying that these horrific events had me squeezing my own family just a little tighter those evenings. But coming together as a family, as communities, as a province is what we do in the face of hardship. Mr. Speaker, I've been quite a fan, it seems of late, of the author John Gordon. I think I even referenced some of his other books in this House, but the latest book, it's a keeper. It's called Training Camp, and in it he talks about the power of story. In particular, he draws to the importance of defining our own story and the role that we play in shaping that story. And I would put forward, Mr. Speaker, that our Saskatchewan story, well, it's a compelling one. One vastly larger than any hardships that we've put before us. Now, since the formal beginning of Saskatchewan's story so many years ago, I would argue that never before has our narrative been so filled with promise, with optimism, with opportunity, but yet circled with a whirlwind of global uncertainty. Our story of Saskatchewan tells of one where we're able to provide a better quality of life for all those who call this beautiful province home. Beyond this, Mr. Speaker, our story tells of a province, a jurisdiction that is rich in all that the planet needs now and in the years to come. A place that is a solution to the global energy challenges, global food challenges, and global environmental challenges. That is why, Mr. Speaker, we need the world to hear the Saskatchewan story, and make no mistake, Mr. Speaker, that story is being heard. Now more than ever, there are calls, global calls, for stable and reliable supply of high-quality products and sustainable, environmentally responsible products. Mr. Speaker, there are global calls for precisely what Saskatchewan has. A couple of weeks ago, alongside my colleague, the Minister of Advanced Education, I had the distinct pleasure of meeting with approximately 30 international heads of missions as part of their diplomatic economic mission to Saskatchewan. To say these international diplomats were interested and engaged in hearing the Saskatchewan story, that certainly would be an understatement. You just can't overstate how they felt about this province. And what else cannot be overstated is our presence on the world stage. Through our 8 and soon to be 9 international trade offices. Personally, Mr. Speaker, I've only had the good fortune to actually visit one of the nations where our trade offices reside presently, but I assure you, Mr. Speaker, our compelling Saskatchewan story now lives and breathes in every single one of them, from Mexico to Vietnam and soon to be Germany. Mr. Speaker, distance-wise, the planet is shrinking. And while its population continues to grow, so too do the myriad of challenges it faces. To these challenges, Mr. Speaker, Saskatchewan is key to the solution. In addition to the solution our oil and gas and uranium and potash and other critical minerals bring to the world, our agriculture sector is a leader in sustainability. Our farmers and ranchers, well, they're innovators. They are world leaders, Mr. Speaker. Whether it be ag tech, plant and animal science, innovative farming practices, or the fact that we sequestered nearly 13 million tons of carbon in our farmlands in 2020, Saskatchewan produces some of the most sustainable wheat, barley, durum, lentils, peas, beans, and canola the world knows. And while the climate change conversation, Mr. Speaker, is a global one, here, home in Saskatchewan, Mr. Speaker, as indicated by the throne speech, we will continue to address these environmental issues through Prairie Resilience, our main Saskatchewan climate change strategy. Our government will provide additional resources to support the work in this province to meet the commitments in Prairie Resilience. And we will also look, Mr. Speaker, to continue to support the world in its efforts to reduce emissions. Mr. Speaker, it is incumbent upon Saskatchewan to continue to produce to our full potential. And it is further incumbent upon us to bring our sustainable products to the global marketplace. What needs to be clearly understood, Mr. Speaker, by everyone in this House, everyone in this country, as a matter of fact, is that Saskatchewan already produces the most sustainable products on the planet. That is, they are produced with fewer emissions comparable to others. Getting more of what we produce here to market is key to lowering global emissions. Mr. Speaker, gone are the days when we are pleased to simply get a ticket and sit into the audience. No, Mr. Speaker, we are now seen as a leader on so many fronts and have stepped up to the mic with our Saskatchewan story, and the world, Mr. Speaker, is becoming very familiar with our lyrics. Mr. Speaker, years ago, my dad got rid of the cattle, and soon the fence posts and barbed wire lined fields, well, they quickly followed. After years, well, actually, it was more like decades, really, you'd be hard-pressed to decipher where one quarter section began and the other one ended. Fields merged over time, and property lines, well, they became vague. There did come a time, Mr. Speaker, when Dad thought it a good idea to reestablish the property line, a means of displaying respect for our neighbours who worked hard to carve out a living beside us. Mr. Speaker, what took decades to move only a couple of meters on our fence lines, and I probably contributed to that because I wasn't the straightest of cultivators, so I probably helped that problem. But the federal government, our federal government, has attempted to move kilometers in 7 short years. Saskatchewan's jurisdiction over our natural resources. Unlike Dad, who saw revisiting jurisdictional boundaries and borders as the right and respectful thing to do, the federal government has shown no inkling of ceasing the encroachment nor respecting the original fence line. Mr. Speaker, as we heard in the throne speech, our government does intend to redraw the jurisdictional fence line as surveyed by the Constitution. The Saskatchewan First Act will indeed clarify and defend our province's right to control our natural resources and ultimately our province's economic future. Our resources are critical to growth that works for everyone, Mr. Speaker. In the province's north, our natural resources are the blood to the northern economy's beating heart. Our sustainable forestry and mining sectors are critical to our province's economy and economic reconciliation taking place right here in the province. For example, Mr. Speaker, Indigenous workers comprise approximately 27% of the workforce in Saskatchewan's forestry sector, and 30% of the provincial timber supply is allocated to Indigenous businesses. Businesses like Norsask Forest Products of Meadow Lake, the largest wholly First Nations-owned and operated sawmill in Canada. Mr. Speaker, in our province's south, our resources are no less important. Our agricultural lands, our oil and gas, our helium and potash, and so much more give air to Saskatchewan's economic lungs, and it is through development, that is sustainable development of these resources, that make our economy strong and provide growth that works for everyone. By defending our jurisdictional rights and our natural resources, we are defending jobs and families and communities. In short, we are defending the quality of life for all Saskatchewanians. Mr. Speaker, the throne speech tells of a story of a province growing, that is getting stronger, and one that is gaining attention of those abroad, but also of one that works to support those who call this place home. To close, Mr. Speaker, in the words of the great Michael Jordan, some people want it to happen, some wish it would happen, and others, well, they make it happen. Mr. Speaker, I would argue that this province has the people and government who are driven by a desire to make it happen. And it's for these reasons that on behalf of all the constituents of Arm River, I will be supporting the motion to move the throne speech. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Saskatoon Centre.
Miigwech, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I'm pleased to be on my feet to provide my response to this speech from the throne. First of all, I just want to thank those who have stood by me and continue to provide their love and support to me as an Indigenous mother, grandmother, and MLA. To my husband, Ivan, thank you for your love and support. I wouldn't be able to do this work without you by my side. To my children, Eric, Daniel, Chantel, and my new daughter-in-law, Raquel, thank you. Thank you for your understanding, your patience. I know when you had your babies, you thought that I would be there to take the kids for overnights and do some more Kokum things with them. So I just want to thank you for your patience. And to my grandchildren, Colby, Sienna, Ava, Ellie, Noah, Caden, and Mateo, Tutu loves you. And to my family back home in Kiniston, and to my community, thank you for your continued support and encouragement. I just want to give a special shout out, like many that have done earlier with their CAs, to my CA, Shane Partridge.
Here, here.
Thank you for your continued dedication, your commitment, and your hard work. My constituents and I are very fortunate to have you as my CA. You have gone above and beyond and have addressed issues that are brought to us in an expedient manner. Thank you, Shane. And to the Saskatoon Centre constituents, the grassroots people, the business owners, the nonprofit organizations that do hard work for the community, that advocate for those that have very little. The work that you do for the ones that are intentionally ignored. I thank you for your dedication and your commitment to the people of Saskatoon Centre. And I would also like to thank the communities all across this province that have invited me to their communities. Many First Nation communities have invited me to their cultural celebrations and their cultural ceremonies. I was invited to attend many Sundance ceremonies throughout the summer. And at each and every one that I was able to attend, I felt very honored and very privileged to be there. At one of those ceremonies, and if anyone knew about cultural ceremonies, the Sundance ceremony is one of the highest. The Sundance Lodgemaker gifted me with this eagle feather I have on my head. And in that ceremony, he talked to the group that was out there, the people out there. And as he was gifting me this in that ceremony, he told me, as an Indigenous person, let alone a First Nation woman, it is hard working in a Eurocentric colonial institution where white privileged ways of doing things are the norm. He said, wear this when you are sitting in that legislature and when you're sitting in that house, because that will give you strength. And that is why I wear this eagle feather, is to honor that. I want to talk about the communities where I've traveled. There's many vibrant communities and proud communities and thriving communities. And they're very proud. And I'm grateful I was able to attend and be in those communities. I also been to communities where they've struggled, where they're burying their loved ones because of suicide. This past summer, a fella that I grew up with had issues with alcohol and drugs. He died. And that was so sad because he didn't have a chance. There was nothing out there for him. And like many others, the James Smith Cree Nation. That was probably the hardest thing that I've had to deal with. That morning, my phone kept ringing. It kept dinging. From people, friends from James Smith, telling me what's going on. I was out there because as Indigenous people, that's what we do. We go out there. I rolled up my sleeves and I went out there and thought, what is it that I can do? I didn't go and talk to just the leaders. I didn't do that. I went out there to talk to the people because I know what it's like to live through something so horrible. The stories I heard from the community people, not from the leadership, but the community people, I cannot unhear. And I'm so grateful my colleagues were there, not for the photo ops, not there to just bring tobacco and sweetgrass, but they actually came in there, rolled up their sleeves. We worked in the kitchen. We cut potatoes, washed the floor, changed garbage bags. That is what we did. Helped with the donations. And what I saw out there was how community people came together from all walks of life to come and help this community. And it was a grueling week. There were things that I didn't want to hear, because no one should have to live through that. But I did, because that's the right thing to do. I didn't sit and visit with leaders and have tea and support them. I actually supported the people in burying their loved ones and helping. It was long hours, long days. John Howard Society was there. My nephew, Shiloh Stevenson, was there. And we worked hard without a break. And we didn't go there to take a photo op. We went there to help the people. And they're going to need the help. And the government talks about wanting to work with people and work together. What I heard in the community, what they need is housing. They need help with mental health and addictions. They need help with policing. That is what I heard. And I certainly hope that this government will walk their talk instead of just platitudes. You know, that was a very difficult time, difficult week, whole 7 days when I was out there. Long days. And for me, it took me a week for my emotions to catch up. And that's just me as an outsider going into this community. And what are those folks out there having to deal with? I think about the ladies in the kitchen. They were running nonstop and coordinating for meals. And we needed a lot of help out there. And what was so disappointing was leaders, elected leaders, only going out there to chat, to visit with fellow elected leaders. And what we needed was hands on deck. We needed people helping serve. So when you think about the work that we do in this House, think about those people in that community. Think about other communities. Last week, and this didn't make it, I heard it on the news, but we haven't heard a peep from anybody else. In one First Nation community, it took an hour and a half for the police to respond. A young man was shot in his house, in the basement. Took an hour and a half for the police to respond. That's shameful. And we talk about being tough on crime. Why does it take an hour and a half to respond? The horror that family had to go through. Now I'll go on to speaking directly to this throne speech. You know, this government has been patting itself on the back. You know, it's exciting, all the pats on the back that this government is giving themselves in terms of the economic development that's happening in this province, especially First Nations. Yes, it's nice to have a smile on your face, Mr. Premier. The First Nations themselves have worked very hard to make economic development a reality in their nations. No thanks to the Sass Party. Those nations themselves have done the hard work. You know, there's a word that's so sexy in this chamber, in this province, and it's called economic reconciliation. We love throwing that word around. Yet, there are still many Indigenous communities that are still being left out of that economic reconciliation. Major projects are still being awarded to out-of-province contractors and other stakeholders, while Indigenous communities are still being given trinkets and beads. Like my friend John says, we are invited to the table, but we aren't allowed to eat. Or when we are allowed to eat, we are only given crumbs. How many nations are being excluded in the procurement? And how many barriers are created for nations who want in on this economic reconciliation? Affordability in this province. People in this province, people in my constituency, can barely make ends meet. The food bank is in my constituency, and people are using that a lot. The $500 that you guys are talking about giving to the people in this province, you know what my constituents are doing? They're using that $500 so they can pay their utility bills that they're behind on because of how high cost of living is. That's what's happening. So I'm going to ask you, so with this money that's come in, what is this government going to do to keep the cost of living down? Because my people, the people in my constituency, as well as other people across this province, are suffering. You know, there's something I want to talk about here, and this is about the government has made alcohol in this province so affordable, especially in the north. How is that so? We have subsidies. And you all know this, that food in the north is expensive. To transport that food up there is costly. Milk is more expensive than alcohol. Alcohol is subsidized. When is this government going to subsidize transportation so food can be affordable for the people in the north? And this government, Mr. Speaker, talks about the Saskatchewan people own the province's resources. Then why are people from the north and Indigenous people not benefiting? This government continues to take from the north. You take the resources out of the north, but you're not putting that money back into the north. Look at the high suicide rates, the poverty. Health, people are dying. We don't talk about that much. I'm going to talk about the reconciliation. We love talking about that. Reconciliation is very important to us. We love spewing that. But you know what? We talk about, and the Minister for Government Relations spoke about this today, about acknowledging the treaty land that he's on. And we love talking about that. We love doing land acknowledgements, yet we don't talk about the Crown land that's still being sold today on those very territories that we're acknowledging. Treaty education. In my inaugural speech, I talked about having treaty education for all MLAs. That hasn't happened. Yet we have these signs on the highway recognizing treaty in 4 and 6 territory. And I've found that the Minister for Government Relations found out about the treaty boundaries in Europe. He didn't know about them here in Saskatchewan. And I thought, wow, in Europe. Well, that's why it's important to have treaty education here for our MLAs, so that ministers or MLAs don't have to travel to Europe to find out about treaty boundaries. And talk about the environment now. I'm a mother and I'm a grandmother. You know, as a kid growing up, my parents instilled in me, you take care of Mother Earth will take care of you. When you take from Mother Earth, you put back into Mother Earth. That is what I was taught. And I think about my grandchildren. I think about those that have asthma. When we have forest fires, how many of us can't breathe? What are we doing today so that our children and those that come behind can live? And each time we're stripping Mother Earth, what are we doing? What are we going to leave our children and those that come behind? The white paper. The white paper. Wow, when I first heard about this, I thought, oh my goodness, 1982, the white paper all over again. Is it 82? Trudeau, the older Trudeau. I thought about this and I thought, oh my goodness. This is like the 1969 white paper that the federal government introduced. And this provincial white paper that was introduced mentions nothing about treaty protection. We talk about constitutional rights, Yet we as a province are not protecting those constitutional rights, those treaty rights. We're not doing that. Yet we're not even engaging Indigenous people in those discussions. Many people in Indian country have issue with this white paper. I had a chat with several people today about this white paper and the province now suddenly taking the stance they're going to protect the constitutional rights. Well, where were you in protecting the treaty rights? Where were you guys? And where are you today in protecting those? Where you are today is you're selling off Crown land to the highest bidder. You're taking the rest of the Indian out of us. What land is going to be left for my grandchildren and those that come behind? How are they going to exercise their inherent rights? The consultations you guys are touting yourselves with and handing out money left, right, and center, when we know that is just talk. You have no intention of consulting in a meaningful way. Absolutely nothing. Nothing about that consultation is going to change anything. Because you know what? Policy is not enforceable. You could try hoodwinking the Indigenous community with, we're refreshing this duty to consult. You can do that. But you know what? We're getting educated. We are educated. And we have a voice. And we are exercising that voice. And we are saying, enough's enough. You may hoodwink the rest of the citizens in this province, but you're certainly not going to do that to us. And these policies that you keep throwing at us and tweaking, they're not enforceable. When it comes to duty to consult, we know in this province we need legislation because legislation is enforceable. Policy isn't. Many people have already talked to the governments, and here's the sad thing. I hear over and over again, different ministries, you're not talking to each other. You're not talking to each other. And then this notion of nation to nation. When you guys are having these meetings around duty to consult, chiefs are at those tables, leaders are at those tables, but who do you send? You send the low man on the pole. You don't send the equivalent, you don't send a ministry, you don't do that. So this nation to nation is bogus. And I'll tell you, Indigenous people, they just know you're giving lip service. So there's things in here, you know, that the community, the grassroots people that have issues with this government of giving lip service, of slapping just a few $1,000s and saying, go away, be quiet. The contracts that are being given out to your friends. Indigenous people are not going to have it. They're going to be speaking up. And one thing I do have to say, and I'll give you credit, and the only reason I'll give you credit is because I've been on your tail about this duty to consult. The only reason you're moving on this is because Indigenous people have been getting louder and louder when it comes to duty to consult. So what I say to you, and I invite you to do, is keep moving, keep doing, keep working, because you have decades to catch up on. So with that, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'll conclude my remarks, and I won't be supporting this government's motion, and I will be supporting the amendment. Miigwech.
I recognize the Minister of Mental Health, Addiction, Seniors, Rural and Remote Health.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Chair of Committees, Mr. Deputy Speaker, for the introduction and for the opportunity to say a few words on the record here tonight in response to the throne speech that was released last week. A very, very thorough throne speech, Mr. Speaker, and something that is, serves as a very important document for us as a government moving forward. Mr. Speaker, I would be remiss if I, unlike my fellow colleagues, to not start off my remarks by thanking a few folks that are important to me in my life, as we've all done here in this chamber. First of all, the constituents of Swift Current that I am so honored to represent as their MLA, and who I try to remember each and every day when I am here, and regardless of where I am, where this job takes me, that I'm there to represent their views and opinions and ideas, and I'm so very much grateful for being able to have that opportunity to represent the great people of Swift Current and all that is that they stand for in our constituency. Mr. Speaker, I also want to thank my family members, as we all do in this chamber, that support us in the work that we do as locally elected leaders on behalf of them and the communities that we represent. Mr. Speaker, my wife Anita back home in Swift Current, who keeps the home fires burning while I'm here and elsewhere on the road, and to whom I've been married for, skill testing question now, I think 15 years. I'm going to have to go back and check that. I might be in trouble. I might be buying a gift on my way home to Swift Current later this week, possibly, to make up for this. Mr. Speaker, she's just been absolutely fantastic. And Mr. Speaker, we've been together for 20 years. That I do know. And I just cannot possibly thank her enough for what she does for me and for our family. Our two kids, Raven and Adler Irwin. Raven's here in Regina working in the Queen City, and Adler is in Swift Current. Recently moved a little bit closer to us. He's right across the alley now, so it's great to have him close by. Raven's working in retail right now. Adler is an entrepreneur involved in film and video production, doing some outstanding work. Actually, recently shot a music video for the Hunter Brothers, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and of course he's also a dad to a great 5-year-old little guy named Axel, who is an outstanding grandson to hang out with. Tiring. He takes his grandma and his grandpa, his pop-up and his yaya. He wears them out. But so much fun to be around and to be able to see the world through a 5-year-old's eyes is something else. He was celebrating Halloween yesterday and was dressed up as an army guy and camouflage and everything, and was having fun doing that, and always great to be involved, and kind of missed not being around him for Halloween, but it was good to get some pictures and videos from back home. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank as well my family back home in the Melfort, St. Brew, Tisdale area, where I was born and raised. My mom and dad, Thomas and Patricia Hindley, who recently celebrated their 49th wedding anniversary just last week, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and still farming southwest of Melfort there. Had an opportunity to see them just briefly a couple of weeks ago on my travels through that part of the province, and always good to catch up with mom and dad and the things that are happening back home. My sister Melissa, living in Tisdale with her daughter Elizabeth, who's getting older and taller, Elizabeth is, and hard to believe how time flies. And every once in a while I get an opportunity to connect with them by phone, and of course see them, got a chance to see them earlier this summer and catch up with the things that they're up to in the great community of Tisdale. My other sister Erica and her husband Brad Ingram, just south of Melfort, farming there. They've been married for a couple of years now, and busy in that neck of the woods farming. Erica works in the city of Melfort support there as well, and they're avid outdoors people as well, Mr. Speaker. And then finally, my brother Taylor, living in St. Brew, get that right, living in St. Brew, Saskatchewan, working there for Tillage Tools, Division of Burgo Industries, and there with his significant other Elise, their kids Lizzie and Harrison, who will be turning 1 this coming winter, and a couple of dogs. I'm informed as I checked my messages earlier tonight that I have 3 dogs. I'm not sure about that. 2 kids, 3 dogs. Sounds like a full household to me, but doing some good work and in the community of St. Brew. Mr. Speaker, I also want to thank my colleagues in this chamber on the government caucus here that are part of it. It's great to be part of this amazing team here in this chamber, and good to have a good number of them here tonight, and really fortunate to be surrounded by such talent in this caucus and in this chamber. Really just so very fortunate to be able to call you colleagues and friends and great advisors as well. So thank you to all my colleagues here from the government caucus. Team 2, I'm informed by the member for Indian Head Milestone, who, as we heard from his speech earlier today, he says he's glad he's here tonight, is what he says, Mr. Speaker. Finally, Mr. Speaker, the staff in our offices, my constituency assistant in Swift Current, Nola Smith, who's been holding down the fort there for many years and puts up with me and sometimes my absenteeism, does great work. Frankly, Mr. Speaker, at times like these, she's the face of that office. She's the person on the other end of the phone, the one that answers the emails and does so in a very courteous and prompt and informative fashion each and every day. Just grateful to have Noel as part of our team. And then the staff here in Regina try to keep me on the straight and narrow. I think the Minister of Health may have recognized some of the staff in his office. We kind of share staff from time to time. There's a lot going on in our ministry. Jen Pippis, who's manning the front desk in my office, answering the phones, Director of Traffic, pretty much the air traffic control in that office. Chief of Staff Elias Nelson, Cheyenne Quam handling communications, Ange Pasezhnik and Derek Griffin, who are in casework roles in our office, and of course Lisa Burney, who actually works in the Minister of Health's office but is responsible for helping to coordinate the schedules and all the things that are going on in our lives in our 2 offices there in health. And without those members of our team, we just wouldn't be able to keep our heads on straight, I don't think, Mr. Deputy Speaker, without that. Mr. Speaker, as I talk about the throne speech, and I'm going to touch on a few things here, but we'll focus specifically on the areas that are of significance to healthcare, of course. But I want to thank the healthcare workers, and I'll get into that a little bit later here, Mr. Speaker, with respect to that, and as other members have done here as well this evening. Also want to recognize the fine people of James Smith Cree Nation and what they have endured back at the beginning of September, and have had the opportunity, as have many in this chamber, to meet, to visit, to participate and be involved with the leadership and community members there at James Smith Cree Nation to help them and be walking alongside with them on this path moving forward. And I just wanted to make sure that I recognize the folks from James Smith Cree Nation as well, Mr. Speaker. Back to the throne speech and what's involved in that and why it's important. The title of this year's throne speech, Mr. Speaker, is "Growth That Works for Everyone." And it's important to recognize, and I'm going to run through a few statistics here, a bit of information with respect to the economy and statistical figures in that regards, but then try to connect this to why that's important. Finish the sentence, if you will, Mr. Speaker. So here are some of the very, very positive, forward-looking economic news stories and statistics that are coming out of this province. And you've heard us on this side of the House talk about that in years previous, and we're truly, and sometimes it seems like we're repetitive in nature, but it truly is. We're on the cusp of some very, very good things in the future, but the great things that are already happening right now, today in Saskatchewan, Mr. Speaker, as we go through these weeks and months ahead. In terms of the economy itself, have a look at some of these stats. 2022, Saskatchewan expected to lead all provinces in economic growth right here in Saskatchewan. This past September, we had the unemployment rate of 4.1%, the lowest in the country, below the national average. We're the national leader in many key economic indicators such as manufacturing sales, merchandise exports, the value of wholesale trade. Total exports reached a record high of $37.1 billion with a B dollars, Mr. Speaker, up 24.7% compared to 2020, just a couple of years, Mr. Speaker. Exports have grown since 2007 by 88%, just an absolutely remarkable figure. 2021, Saskatchewan agriculture exports $17.5 billion, the largest on record, Mr. Speaker. Global interest in Saskatchewan's world-class resources continues to rise in the forestry sector and potash in so many areas, Mr. Speaker. Just so much room for growth, growth that's already happening, private sector investment, but continued investment into our province and into our communities, led by not just these companies, but by these leaders in these communities that are part of these whether it's private companies or part of perhaps their municipal leaders in First Nations communities across this province. They're the people that are helping drive this economic growth in this province, Mr. Speaker. So why is that important? Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to point to a few specific pages of the throne speech that I think is why this is important to not just to this government, but I think to each and every one of us in this province and to the future prosperity of Saskatchewan in the years and decades ahead. In the area of healthcare, and this is on about page 4, Mr. Speaker, of the throne speech document, it talks about, and some of my colleagues have mentioned this tonight, about some of the targets that we've set that we want to achieve when it comes to healthcare, such as the target of 97,000 surgeries to be completed, which would be the highest number of surgeries ever to be completed and performed in 1 year. And we're going to, that is an aggressive target, Mr. Speaker, and we're going to do everything we can to try to achieve that target, because it's about patient care in the province of Saskatchewan. To help meet this goal, we're increasing surgical capacity in cities like Regina, like Saskatoon, but also in some of our regional hospitals as well around the province that do have the equipment, that do have the staff. Sometimes they need a little bit more there as well, but they do have the ability to help us when it comes to addressing some of these surgical challenges that we face in this province. Establishing new partnerships, Mr. Speaker, with publicly funded private surgical providers. These are the ideas outside of the box that we need to be able to approach and use if we're going to achieve some of these targets, and I think we're well set to be able to do some of that, Mr. Speaker. Since 2010, Mr. Speaker, private surgical clinics in Saskatchewan perform more than 135,000 publicly funded surgeries, and they will continue to support the public system. In addition to what's already been done, Mr. Speaker, what we're also going to be doing here in the city of Regina is building a new facility that will be providing inpatient joint replacement surgery. That is expected, Mr. Speaker, to begin operations by the end of next year, 2023, but the Minister of Health and myself are trying to expedite that as quickly as possible to make sure that we can get that open and operating, completing surgeries for Saskatchewan residents as quickly as they possibly can, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd maybe jump ahead a couple of pages and talk about mental health and addictions. Some of the investments that have been made in previous years, year after year after year of record investments into mental health and addictions, and continued work that needs to happen in that area, Mr. Speaker. We know that there's an increased demand when it comes to mental health and addiction services, not just in Saskatchewan. We're seeing it and hearing it in other provinces and territories. Next week, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to have the opportunity to be meeting with some of my counterparts, ministers from other provinces and territories responsible for health, responsible for mental health and addictions, to talk about some of the challenges that they see in their jurisdictions and some of the solutions that they are approaching, share some ideas, and also try to come up with some collaborative ways to address some of the challenges that we are all facing. Mr. Speaker, we're working towards the addition of more treatment spaces in this province. We first announced that in last year's throne speech. We've dedicated funding in this year's budget to do it. The RFP process for that closed just at the early part of September, Mr. Speaker, and officials are now going through a number of these submissions and proponents that have applied to that to help provide more addictions treatment spaces in this province, and we're hopeful to be able to make some announcements on the first expansion of those treatment spaces in the very near future. More expansion to rapid access counselling programs delivered by Family Services Saskatchewan. These would be the walk-in mental health clinics in a number of communities around this province, recently expanded in this past year's budget into communities like Kindersley and Moose Jaw and Rosetown to provide people in those communities with easier access and greater access to mental health supports in other areas of the province that have not been served by this particular organization previously. Mr. Speaker, I had the opportunity in August to be in Meadow Lake for the opening of the new community, Northwest Community Lodge, the long-term care home in Meadow Lake, which is the 13th new or renovated long-term care facility to open in Saskatchewan since 2009. There's other projects that are underway as well, Mr. Speaker. Planning continues for L'Orange, which will have more long-term care beds than they currently have, Mr. Speaker. Grenfell will have a new long-term care facility. Watson will have a new long-term care facility. City of Estevan will have a new long-term care facility as well, Mr. Speaker, and that work continues. Construction on a new hospital in Weyburn is expected to begin early on next year, as well as the tendering process and expansion and redevelopment of Victoria Hospital in the fine city of Prince Albert, and that is moving ahead, Mr. Speaker. Now, Mr. Speaker, perhaps one of the focal points for us, and if I could just focus on this for a little bit, and some of this was announced back in early September, but it's a significant portion of the throne speech and the work that our government is going to be doing in the weeks and months ahead. And that is, earlier this summer, the Minister of Health and I had an opportunity and have taken the opportunity to get out on the road and tour around to as many communities and healthcare facilities as we possibly could. And that work continues. There's going to be visits happening in the days and weeks ahead. This is in addition to all of the teleconferences, video conference, all the other consultation work and meetings that happens with communities and healthcare workers virtually, sometimes here in Regina at the legislature. And we're going to continue to do that work. Mr. Speaker, personally, I've had the opportunity to travel to places like Black Lake and Central Butte and Etonia and Esterhazy and Eston, Fond du Lac, Lloydminster, Maple Creek, Meadow Lake, Shaunavon, Uranium City, Wadena, Wilkie, Yorkton. I could go on, Mr. Speaker. It's quite a list, and we're going to continue to do that, to tour healthcare facilities, meet with local leaders, but also meet and talk to specifically to frontline healthcare workers to hear from them directly about some of the challenges that they're facing and to get their solutions and their ideas. And Mr. Speaker, that's where we've come out with, and this is referenced in the throne speech, but Mr. Speaker, the 4-point plan to recruit, train, incentivize, and retain healthcare workers in this province. We have some good stories to tell in Saskatchewan, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to healthcare, and we're making some significant investments as part of that 4-point plan. We announced back in early September $60 million over the next couple of years to add 1,000 more healthcare workers in this province. What I would argue, Mr. Speaker, is one of the, if not the most aggressive and ambitious healthcare recruitment and retention plan right here in the country. I think we see some other provinces perhaps copying and pasting a little bit, Mr. Speaker. It's fine by me. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, Mr. Speaker, but we're going to continue to do this work. And, Mr. Speaker, that focuses on a number of significant investments in this area. In the area of recruiting hundreds of internationally educated healthcare workers from overseas is one of the examples of one of the initiatives we're going to be doing. A call for unlicensed Saskatchewan and/or Canadian residents who are internationally trained, who might already be here, Mr. Speaker, but are running into perhaps some roadblocks, some things that we can help out with, that we can streamline and help to get them into the system. As part of that announcement and part of the 4-point plan, Mr. Speaker, starting this fall, we'll have some health system navigators to help with some of this process, to make sure that we're getting the people that we need and to do so in a timely basis, Mr. Deputy Speaker. A healthcare recruitment mission to the Philippines later this fall, Mr. Speaker, that's going to be happening as well. Training. We announced some significant training expansion, and this, I would remind members that, Mr. Speaker, that this builds upon existing work that's already been done. Some of this in the most recent budget, some of it in years previous, but this continues to build and continues to evolve when it comes to our healthcare strategy in Saskatchewan. A 150 nursing seat expansion that occurred this fall through the University of Saskatchewan, as well as the U of R and Sask Poly, Mr. Speaker. A streamlined and accelerated training and assessment licensure pathway for internationally educated nurses, developing more training pathways for those in high school, to get in front of high school students in our high schools in Saskatchewan, to promote and give them the information they need about some exciting healthcare opportunities that are here in our province, and to help get them interested and help get them on those pathways to healthcare right here in Saskatchewan. Further advancing connections with our First Nations and Métis partners and the training institutes there to get more First Nations and Métis healthcare workers involved in our system. I've had the opportunity to talk to several First Nations communities and leaders and frontline individuals, and that's something that we're going to continue to pursue, Mr. Speaker. Incentives. New incentives in this fall's announcement that are also referenced in this throne speech. The introduction of a new incentive package of up to $50,000 for over a 3-year return of service agreement for some of these hard-to-recruit positions, RNs, care aides, CLXTs, Mr. Speaker. This is on top of existing programs, a student loan forgiveness program. It's on top of that. It's on top of the graduate retention program, the final clinical placement bursary. This is new funding to help get people into rural communities and remote areas of this province. And Mr. Speaker, I can tell you we're starting to see some success there. We've seen announcements in Biggar where they're recruiting more nurses. We've seen the recruitment of more nurses coming to CAMSAC, and we'll have more to say in the coming days about what that's going to do for services in that community. Finally, Mr. Speaker, in the area of retention, and this kind of ties into some of the incentives and some of the other announcements, the addition of 100 new full-time positions and converting in 150 part-time positions to full-time permanent. Mr. Speaker, that's something that the Minister of Health and I heard during our tours. We went to many communities, walked through the hallways of hospitals and healthcare facilities and long-term care homes, and heard from healthcare workers and local leaders and healthcare managers who said, you know what, we've got these positions, but they've been unfilled for a period of time. We've been trying, but we can't get people to fill them, or we have people that are available to fill them, but they can't fill them because they're a temporary position, they're a part-time position, or they're just not full-time permanent positions. But we know of individuals in our community that would apply and bid on those positions if only they were permanent and full-time. We've advanced some funding to the SHA to make sure we can identify these areas where we have temporary service disruptions so we can get the people hired into those spots that we need to fully restore those services. And that's the commitment of this government, Mr. Speaker, to restore the services in these communities where they've been temporarily disrupted. And that's where the action is, Mr. Speaker, part of this 4-point action plan to recruit, train, incentivize, retain healthcare workers, Mr. Speaker. There's also the establishment of a new healthcare recruitment agency. That work is underway. The posting for that CEO position has been made, Mr. Speaker, and we're advancing that as quickly as possible. We know that we need to act quickly, and we're going to continue to do this good work. This plan will evolve, Mr. Speaker, and it will do so supporting our communities, supporting healthcare right across this province, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think I've probably gone on long enough just on that section of the throne speech alone, and I know my colleagues, some of the previous speakers, have had the opportunity to touch on some other areas, and there's many more to come after me that will highlight and do a much better job than I have of explaining and telling why this throne speech is significant, not just for the people in this chamber, for this government, for everyone in this province, people right across Saskatchewan, north, south, east, and west, regardless of where they come from, what demographic they're in, and who they, and who they're represented by. Mr. Speaker, it's a good throne speech. It's a great throne speech, Mr. Speaker, and I will be supporting the throne speech. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize the member from Cutknife Turtleford.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, it's a great honour to stand up here this evening and support the throne speech. It's been a busy year in our province with unprecedented private investments as seen in the last several months, which will help our province grow over the next decade. This is a great start in the early beginnings of this decade to help this government achieve our 30 goals by 2030 as outlined in our growth plan. By all indications that we have seen so far, I believe what's happened to date in this province over the past 2 years will actually help us surpass our goals in some instances. Before I deliver my throne speech, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I would like to take this opportunity to thank a few people back home. First of all, I'd like to thank my wife, Noella. Thank you for continuing to stand by me and supporting me and making it possible for me to be here today. I could not have done this without you, and for that I'm forever grateful. Another very important person that I would like to thank is my constituency assistant, Jackie Gowan. Her personal support and dedication to her job in the office and helping assisting constituents has been incredible. This makes my job much easier and allows me the time needed to dedicate to other areas of importance with respect to constituents' concerns. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I would like to also thank my 2 sons, Logan and Lyndon, for their support over the past 2 years. I'm so happy to say that they both reside here in Saskatchewan, and as parents, my wife and I couldn't be happier. Our oldest son, Logan, lives and works full-time in Turtleford at our local co-op in the petroleum department, delivering fuel to the commercial and agricultural sectors. This co-op is considered a very progressive retail and is extremely community-minded and supportive of various organizations and events. Our son has also adopted this theme as he's very involved in the local Lions Club and the senior hockey team and truly gives back to the community. We are so proud of who he has become and what he has accomplished. Mr. Deputy Speaker, he was fortunate enough to purchase his first house only a few blocks away from where my wife and I reside last year. While this at first seemed like it'd be a great idea to have him in the same community and living so close, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I can honestly say there has been the occasional time when I've questioned that theory. All joking aside, we are so fortunate to have him live so close and be able to offer assistance if needed, especially when I'm away with constituency commitments. However, the reality is that if he were to be purchasing this house this year, it would never have happened. When you take into consideration the rising inflationary costs and pressures we've seen along with the Bank of Canada's interest rate hikes made in recent months, he simply would not have been able to afford to purchase his first home and truly become independent. I'm happy to say that our youngest son, Lyndon, is in his last year of university and will be convocating next spring from the Edwards School of Business at the University of Saskatchewan with his commerce degree, his major being marketing. We are so proud of him and what he's accomplished so far. I'm so looking forward to him completing his education, as the future for this province looks promising and bright. Mr. Deputy Speaker, one of this government's overreaching goals is to have opportunity for all of our kids in the province, and I believe that with all of the economic activity throughout the province, whether it be in agriculture, industry, or our resource sector, just to name a few, we are in fact exceeding in meeting this goal. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I would also like to take this opportunity to thank my constituency association back home. President Stu Irvin, Vice President Darryl Francu, Secretary Roxanne Irvin, Treasurer Becky Schmidt, and last but not least, my membership chair, my wife Noella. They've been a great team to work with and have been very supportive of me, which I am truly appreciative. Mr. Deputy Speaker, and all of this would not be possible if it wasn't for the support of the constituents. It's my honour and privilege to serve as their representative in the legislature, and for that I would like to say thank you. This past summer has been great, being out and about throughout the constituency and attending various community events and getting to speak with constituents. And now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I would like to acknowledge and say thanks to this great team of people that I get to work with on a daily basis. The Premier that I serve under and the caucus that I work with are, I believe, the best that we have in this great country of ours. And on top of that, I have to give credit to all the staff in each of the ministries, as well as the caucus office. Their help in responding to any issues that we have brought to their attention does not go unnoticed and is very much appreciated. It would be difficult to do my job without their support. Before I continue on with respect to addressing the throne speech, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I think it is important to acknowledge the tragic events that occurred on James Smith Cree Nation on September 4th of this year. This tight-knit community has experienced devastating losses of loved ones that have affected several families as well as affecting the community as a whole. The ripple effect was felt through the whole province, and our thoughts and prayers went out to those that had lost loved ones, as well as the community as a whole. Although it will take the community what I suspect is a very long time to heal, the people of James Smith Cree Nation are resilient and will get back up with pride when the community comes together again. The other heartbreaking event that occurred was on September 8th, when we lost a remarkable woman, Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. At the young age of 25, Queen Elizabeth acceded to the throne after her father's passing in 1952. Her reign of over 70 years has been an incredible period of history and is the longest of any British monarch, and is the only queen most of us have ever known our entire lives. This year we honour Her late Majesty's extraordinary contributions to Canada and the world. In celebration of Her late Majesty's service to the Commonwealth, the province of Saskatchewan is honouring the service of 7,000 deserving individuals across the province with the Queen's Platinum Jubilee Medal. And now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I would like to take this opportunity to make a few comments on the throne speech. Earlier, I indicated that the future looks bright for this province. I referred to my son, Lyndon, who's in his last year of commerce at the U of S. This past summer, he was fortunate to have the experience of working as a summer student for Nutrien at their head office in Saskatoon. It was through this employment where he really got to learn more about agriculture and the importance it plays in our provincial economy and abroad. During his short 4-month tenure at Nutrien, he was able to experience what customer service really means when he was sent to Calgary office to work for a couple of weeks and learn about team building and building customer relationships. Then he was sent to Jacksonville, Florida to tour the White Springs, Florida phosphate plant, as well as touring the Augusta, Georgia nitrogen plant to learn about the mining process and how to transform raw material into chemically compounded products for resale. And finally, attending Nutrien's sales office in Chicago, where he's able to tour the Marco NPK Clinton, Illinois fertilizer facility, as well as the Marseilles, Illinois phosphate plant. This was all part of his journey to learn the more in-depth complexities with respect to marketing and establishing customer relationships and the importance of how that benefits a global company like Nutrien, which has their head office located right here in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Mr. Deputy Speaker, when you look at the investments that are being made in the agriculture industry with respect to the construction of several new canola crushing plants, BHP's commitment to invest a total of $12 billion to complete the Jansen potash mine, as well as ag-related product expansion, such as the new retail and fertilizer facility being constructed at Hamlin, right in the Cut Knife Turtleford constituency. It says a lot about the future of this province and the ag sector. GBAC's new facility in Hamlin will support the agriculture industry in northwest Saskatchewan and focus on supporting their dry and liquid fertilizer services, and will provide increased storage capacity, speed, and flexibility to serve their customers, as well as offering various specialized programs which are designed to meet the agronomic needs of farmers today and into the future. When you consider all of the great things happening in the ag sector, as well as our resource sector, when you look at the recent investment announcements, the economic growth, and the thousands of jobs being created, and all the opportunities that are and will be available to residents, you have to admit the future looks promising and bright for this province as we continue to grow and offer economic prosperity. Mr. Deputy Speaker, you know, I can't help but feel that, like our spring budget indicated, this province is in fact back on track. Mr. Deputy Speaker, our government, while recognizing the strong resource revenues we recently have realized, we've used this projected surplus to help Saskatchewan people with the rising costs due to inflation, as well as reducing the province's debt. And that is why this government has developed the 4-point Saskatchewan Affordability Plan, a Saskatchewan Affordability Tax Credit payment of $500, which will be distributed to all Saskatchewan residents this fall. While not being a cure for the inflationary pressures we are presently seeing, this will definitely help alleviate some of the stresses people are experiencing with increased costs for fuel and food. I know that I have personally heard from some constituents who, while working full-time and providing for their family, are definitely struggling, and this will provide some assistance and is much appreciated. The PST removal from fitness and gym memberships and some recreational activities from the planned October PST expansion on admissions, entertainment, and recreation. The extension of the small business tax reduction at 0% retroactive to July 1st, 22. This will help ensure that businesses have the most success as the province recovers from the pandemic, in addition to facing new challenges such as inflationary pressures, interest rate hikes, and supply chain issues. I know that this is welcome news from several business owners who are still trying to recover from their losses during COVID-19. And finally, the retirement of $1 billion in debt. The province no longer needs to borrow for operations due to the improved financial situation, and retiring $1 billion in debt will save taxpayers approximately $50 million in interest charges. Mr. Deputy Speaker, helping Saskatchewan people during a tough time of higher costs, but also being able to retire debt, strikes the right balance and provides growth that works for everyone. But dare I say, we do not stop there. Mr. Deputy Speaker, healthcare has been one of the most challenging matters that this government has had to deal with, and shortages of healthcare workers has continued to be a challenge. This is not a unique situation for Saskatchewan or Canada, Mr. Deputy Speaker. This is in fact a global issue being felt around the world. However, our government has been a leader and innovator in addressing this issue. Much credit needs to go out to our two health ministers and their respective staff for addressing the shortage of healthcare workers in our province and creating a 4-point action plan to help add over 1,000 healthcare professionals. Working to recruit hundreds of outside health professionals to Saskatchewan, which I understand has already garnished approximately 400 applicants in the healthcare-related fields from internationally educated healthcare professionals, and over 3,500 applications from the Philippines. Accelerated training and licensing for international nurses, as well as an increase of 150 new nursing training seats in the province. Incentives of up to $50,000 for hard-to-recruit positions, mainly in our rural areas that are struggling to find qualified healthcare professionals for their healthcare facilities. And finally, retaining positions by establishing 100 new full-time positions and moving 150 part-time positions to full-time for high-demand professionals in rural Saskatchewan. These new targeted initiatives will have a huge impact for the Cut-Knife-Turtleford constituency healthcare services sector. Communities such as Lloydminster, Maidstone, North Battleford, Turtleford, Unity and Wilkie are all listed in the recruitment incentive document. Our government is committed to building a stronger healthcare system ready to meet the needs of a growing province by offering competitive incentive packages and focusing on key retention practices to safeguard our rural communities and having access to healthcare services. That is why this government has set a target of 97,000 surgeries for this year, which will be the highest number of surgeries ever performed in 1 year. Mr. Deputy Speaker, agriculture is still a keystone to our economy. That is why our government has heard and listened to the Saskatchewan Cattlemen's Association and the struggles cattle producers are having in accessing large animal veterinarians to assist with their cattle production operations. To help address this situation, we have increased the number of veterinary training seats in our college. We have also recently announced that we will expand the eligibility of the Saskatchewan Loan Forgiveness for Veterinarians and Veterinary Technologists program to include those that provide services to rural or remote communities. This program is anticipated to attract veterinary professionals to work in rural areas by forgiving a portion of the Saskatchewan student debt for up to 5 years to a maximum of $20,000. To support our agriculture grain producers, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we have signed another 5-year agreement of the Sustainable Canadian Agricultural Partnership. This represents a 25% rise in the cost-shared portion of the partnership and increases the agri-stability compensation rate from 70% to 80%, which ensures that our producers will remain viable and provide enhanced economic sustainability. Mr. Deputy Speaker, our highways are key to our economic recovery and moving our products throughout the province. Investments in highways across the province, such as those right in the constituency of Cut-Knife-Turtleford, are examples of how this government is following through on commitments to improve safety and support economic growth. Our constituency was fortunate to receive several upgrades, which include 12 kilometres of resurfacing, which was completed at the end of October on Highway number 4 in the vicinity of North Battleford, and Highway number 204 access, as well as various roadways, campsites, and parking areas within the Battleford's Provincial Park. These improvements are welcome news and will ensure people can enjoy camping, hiking, boating, and fishing for the thousands who come and visit annually. Recently, the Minister of Highways and I were both invited to bring greetings at the Highway 21 bypass completion event held in August in Unity. This $5.6 million investment is a partnership between the Ministry, the Town of Unity, the Arm of Brown Valley, and the Northwest Terminal, and another glowing example of what can be accomplished when you have government, municipalities, and industry working together for a common goal. CEO Jason Skinner has said, and I quote, "Northwest Terminal plans to develop a world-class processing and transportation hub that will be accessed from the realigned Highway 21. This highway bypass will contribute directly to economic growth while improving safety for all drivers." End quote. My colleague from the Battlefords and I were also able to tour the Northwest Terminal in Unity. While their grain terminal is an instrumental part of their business, hosting an efficient, high-throughput grain elevator with a total storage capacity of 2.3 million bushels, which I'm proud to say is also one of the largest handling facilities in Western Canada. Not only are they a major grain handling facility, they also operate a 25 million litre per year bioproducts facility adjacent to their terminal. This bioproducts facility produces ethanol for fuel as well as high-protein feed supplement in the form of dried distiller's grade. This has allowed Northwest Terminal to enter into the specialty alcohol market. As a result of their continued successes, they are presently in the process of constructing an additional 11,000 square foot barrel aging warehouse, which is expected to store approximately 8,000 barrels of alcohol for aging once in full production. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this project is just another example of how our government is following through on our commitment to improve safety and support economic growth. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I recently was able to take a tour of the Secure Energy facility in Unity as well, which has underground caverns that are used to service the industrial oil field waste generated in the surrounding area. I was amazed to learn about the technology and environmental benefits provided by the facility. The salt caverns used are those which have been purchased from Sifto Canada Inc., which is located adjacent to this Secure Energy facility. These salt caverns are caverns which have been depleted of their usable salt capacity and are now basically recycled, if you will, with oil field waste. The underground caverns, which started about 3,600 feet below the surface, are considered a safe and secure way to store oil field and industrial waste, as salt makes an effective barrier against leachate. By 2015, 18 years from its original startup, the first cavern was completely filled. The second cavern has been in the use for 22 years, Mr. Deputy Speaker, with a start date back in 2000. But it is a much larger space, comprised of not one, but 3 former salt brine wells. It continues to receive waste to this day and is considered an environmentally sustainable way of storing oil field waste, as well as providing economic enhancements for the community and the province. Personally, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I view this as another advancement provided by our resource industry that again provides growth that works for everyone. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we know that in rural Saskatchewan, crime is still an issue, and this government has taken significant steps to ensure our families and communities are safe. But more needs to be done, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and that is why we will be establishing the Saskatchewan Marshals Service, which will provide support to other law enforcement organizations when requested. We will be adding 8 more officers to the warrant enforcement and suppression team in Prince Albert and ensure that those who have warrants for their arrest for serious criminal activities will be apprehended and placed in custody. We will add 1 more crime reduction team in North Battleford, which will assist the immediate areas in reducing crime. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we will do everything in our power to ensure our residents are protected from the federal government's random solution of trying to reduce crime by punishing our law-abiding gun owners and work with the RCMP to enhance law enforcement across Saskatchewan. This will include taking meaningful action to crack down on illegal gun users' use of firearms in the commission of illegal or violent crimes. Mr. Deputy Speaker, my colleague from Lloydminster and I have heard from constituents, RCMP members, and various elected officials regarding the closure of the Lloydminster Courthouse and how that has impacted not only the community, but the ability for individuals that are on low incomes to appear in court without incurring extra traveling costs. We listened to our constituents, and that's why it was welcome news that this government announced it will reopen and restore the services to the provincial courthouse in Lloydminster. This will ensure timely prosecutions for those that actually commit the crimes, as well as serving the surrounding area residents to provide for more manageable access of court services. Mr. Deputy Speaker, as part of the continued commitment to supporting veterans and building stronger communities, the Government of Saskatchewan has strengthened the long-term sustainability of provincial service clubs. Back home, the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 142 in Maidstone received grant funding of $2,500 for operations and $16,918 for project funding. A grand total of over $19,000 will be used for improvements, which was much appreciated from the local club. The Government of Saskatchewan is once again partnering with the Sask Parks and Recreation Association in accepting applications for the Community Rink Affordability Grant. In the past, the constituency of Cutknife Turtleford has had over 21 ice surfaces in various communities which have benefited from the grant program. This funding is a critical building block in ensuring that recreational places continue to make our communities great places to live, work, and play. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we know that sometimes federal and provincial governments have differing opinions on certain matters, and that's normal and can usually be followed up by open dialogue and compromises on both sides to accomplish what is the best for the constituents. However, when you have a federal government that leads by being more of an authoritarian, whereby they impose roadblocks affecting particular provincial interests, and whereby making various policies that are only applicable to certain provinces and are not equally applied throughout the nation, then, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we seem to have reached an impasse. And that is why this government will introduce legislation this fall that will clarify and define what Saskatchewan has exclusive jurisdictional power over, all within the existing Canadian Constitution, of which we are defining to ensure we're not treated unfairly or differently than other provinces which are part of the same Constitution. Mr. Deputy Speaker, our population growth of 6,500 people in the last quarter is the largest quarterly increase in population ever recorded. We have 20,500 more people working today than in 2021, and we have the lowest unemployment rate in Canada, presently at 4.1%. Saskatchewan has what the world needs: food, fuel, and fertilizer. And it is important that we stand up to defend Saskatchewan's economy, jobs, and future. More people, more jobs, and more investments are important to continue to offer important government services that our residents can afford to sustain. And that is why, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in closing, I will be supporting the throne speech as is presented, and I will not be supporting the proposed amendment. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Regina Elphinstone Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It's a pleasure to weigh in on the speech from the throne debate. I do want to begin by thanking my outgoing constituency assistant, Sawyer Nast. I have spoken at length in this place about the ways in which Sawyer stood shoulder to shoulder with the people of Regina Elphinstone Centre and the amazing service that she provided, and we continue to miss her dearly. I also want to welcome my incoming constituency assistant, Avery Bowden. Avery brings a background in social work. She has experience in the addiction and mental health field. She has a record of service up north. She's been very active in the party. She's done considerable Indigenous solidarity work. And she's owner to Clem, so we now have an office dog, which is nice. And it occurred to me, we recently took a picture of Clem, and Clem got a lot of likes, and that might be the reason that the member for Wall Shakers has his nose so out of joint. Again, about our social media success, Clem got a lot of likes, maybe more likes than the member from Wall Shakers gets, but Clem is very cute. What can I say? What can I say? I want to thank my family. I want to thank my partner, Nick, who's a teacher. I want to thank my brothers and my sisters-in-law, and I want to thank my folks who have been leaning on a little more lately, not just because my 9-month-old and 3.5-year-old have a fever at home as we speak, but they in total make up my impenetrable and unwavering support net. So I want to begin by thanking them, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Then I think I'll just jump right into it. Here we are just a few days in from the speech from the throne, and the Premier has made a very sad spectacle of this province, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And it's not the first time. But it was very frustrating to hear, I was impressed to watch my colleague, the member from Regina University, eviscerate, just roast this government.
Oh, hear, 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 hear.
And the response, the member opposite who spoke next said, what he heard was, you just hate Saskatchewan. They think we just hate, and
Can I ask the member to stick with the speech from throne response?
This is so in his speech from the throne, the member opposite said, "We just hate Saskatchewan so much." And to me, it just highlighted the arrogance on that side, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that they actually have gotten to a point where they consider the Sask Party synonymous with Saskatchewan. And that just couldn't be further from the truth, Mr. Deputy Speaker. You know, we are sick on this side, Mr. Speaker. We are sick of the way that the Sask Party is representing this province to the world, the way that they're destroying the social fabric of this province, and the way that they're distracting and dividing. We are a province known for our humility, for our grace, for our sense of community, for our creative problem solving, Mr. Deputy Speaker. But that government continues to lean into American-style bravado, chauvinism, and hypocrisy. And it's perhaps the hypocrisy that was on full display the most this week, Mr. Deputy Speaker. One set of rules for the members opposite and another set of rules for everyone else. Because this government is tough on crime. Well, some crime. Crime driven by poverty, by intergenerational violence, colonialism, crime involving permitless protest in the park, crime driven by addiction, by mental health, by lack of hope, by lack of opportunity, by lack of a sense of belonging, Mr. Deputy Speaker. This government is tough on that crime. Crime committed by entitled, powerful, misogynistic wife murderers? Hold the phone. We're not sure. 5 days. I'm talking about premeditated acts of beating and murdering your ex-wife, not a crime of want, not a crime of situation, not a crime of desperation or even passion. This was a premeditated act of gruesome violence, an unimaginable act. But they're not tough on that crime, Mr. Deputy Speaker. 5 days. 5 days. And it is how they initially responded to the fact that people were taken aback by Thatcher's presence on this floor. I suggest that says all you need to know about this government, about their instincts, about their moral compass, their sense of decency. That an apology wasn't forthcoming for 5 days until they were up against the wall, until the entire world was watching and gave them a collective spanking, Mr. Speaker, a costly lesson in basic human decency. That's what it took before this government apologized, before the Premier stood and apologized, and we still haven't heard words of apology from the Minister of Correction. You know, what James Smith Cree Nation asked for, Mr. Deputy Speaker, they did not ask for a tough-on-crime agenda that won't work. They asked for Indigenous-led supports, drug treatment, addiction, mental health supports, Indigenous-led justice and policing. No doubt in recognition of the fact that 80% of folks in our penal system are Indigenous, despite the fact that they represent 16% of our population. But I guess they know better, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Speaking of this government's concerning lack of consultation with Indigenous folks, speaking of the ways in which this government continues to make us the laughingstock of the country, let's talk about the white paper. The whitest white paper, Mr. Deputy Speaker. A most ugly and public temper tantrum. This is not how we defend Saskatchewan's interests effectively. This is not the dignity and the strength that we need from our leaders in seeking fairness for Saskatchewan on the national stage in federalism, Mr. Deputy Speaker. This is not how to be taken seriously. The Sask Party and the Premier are destroying our credibility, Mr. Deputy Speaker. But this is part of a playbook that we're getting to know quite well. And we knew the Premier wasn't a dynamic guy, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We already knew that he's never seen a crisis here at home, needing honest work and solutions that he hasn't used as a pretext to distract and divide. We saw this whole dog and pony show with COVID, when COVID hit, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It was when our biggest export was ICU patients that this dream of the nation within a nation was born. When this province is in crisis, instead of rolling up their sleeves, of finding solutions for the people of this province, this government gaslights us and embarrasses us so we can't even be taken seriously at those tables where we need to make our case, Mr. Deputy Speaker. You know, the Premier takes credit for Saskatchewan's collectivist spirit, for our natural resources. He loves to say that Saskatchewan has what the world needs. But the bigger question, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is increasingly whether Saskatchewan needs this Premier. Saskatchewan women are especially really rethinking whether they need this Premier, Mr. Deputy Speaker. After a convicted wife murderer, Colin Thatcher, was hosted by the members opposite, and then his presence here was fiercely defended until that position was no longer politically tenable. Doctors, nurses, healthcare workers, Mr. Deputy Speaker, who are jumping ship, who are leaving this province, they're making it very clear that they have no need for this Premier. And if we had any question about it, they are writing letters, they are speaking with the media, they are tweeting about why they are leaving this province. The 350 securely employed folks at the SLGA, good full-time mortgage-paying jobs with pensions and benefits at a profitable Crown corporation, a Crown corporation that helps pay for our schools, our hospitals, our roads. Those 350 workers who will now be without a job going into Christmas, they have no need for this Premier, Mr. Deputy Speaker. People across this province who can't find a family doctor, who are being turned away from hospitals, people in Esterhazy, Melville, Priestville, Kenora, Watrous, Biggar, Herbert, Regina, Saskatoon, Assiniboia, Belcarris, Warman, Martinsville, Lanigan. Macklin, the people of Wilkie, Norquay, Moose Jaw, Lambton, Broadview, Kamsack, Regina Beach, Cooper, Southie, Meadow Lake, Ile-la-Crosse. Mr. Deputy Speaker, oh, but it's us that closed the hospitals. Those people were turned away from their blah, blah, blah. That's what I just heard. These are people that were turned away from their health centres. Some of them were sent to other communities where they then learned that those health centres were also closed. Or perhaps you want to say blah, blah, blah to Kendall Carlberg, who had to deliver her baby on the side of the road during a high-risk pregnancy. Blah, blah, blah. That's what the member opposite just said, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Again, the arrogance, the chauvinism, they're seething in it. And not a word in this throne speech, Mr. Deputy Speaker, on spending for health care, for education, or to relieve the crippling cost of living crisis we're experiencing. Essential daycare workers, Mr. Deputy Speaker, who still haven't received wages that will sustain them in one of the most important careers, the profession that shapes all other professions. And we are nowhere near creating the 28,000 spaces that have been promised, let alone in staffing them. Saskatchewan people, Saskatchewan residents who work for the federal government, who recently and unfairly found themselves caught up in a cheap little stunt by the Premier and the member for the Battlefords. You know, Mr. Deputy Speaker, what was so concerning about that was that the Premier thought nothing of hosting social media comments that threatened the actual lives of those Saskatchewan residents who worked for the federal government. Shoot, shovel, shut up. Shoot first, ask questions later. Could the farmer shoot them asking for a friend? LOL. What happens if a firearm is accidentally discharged in the general direction of this trespasser? Don't we have shoot first, ask questions later trespass laws in Saskatchewan? This is taken from the social media, the public social media pages of the member for the Battlefords and the Premier. This was left up for days. They may still be there, I don't know. These are Saskatchewan residents, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And wherever you fall on that issue, it is absolutely unacceptable that the Premier continued to host these comments. It may have been politically advantageous to him to see this kind of distraction and division play out. I guess that was the whole point of this. But this is truly distressing. The housing insecure, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to those facing eviction, utility cutoffs at alarming rates. They are absolutely panicked, unable to make ends meet. And all this government is doing is piling on the suffering. No affordability relief, doubling down on CIS, no increase to SED in 7 years. These people have all but been abandoned by this government. Let's call a spade a spade. Every single stakeholder has roundly criticized these programs. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to them. The economics don't line up. If you don't care about the human suffering, let's talk about the economics. They don't line up. They don't care. Single parents trying to keep enough food in the cupboard, Mr. Deputy Speaker, they have no use for this Premier. They are stressed to the max. You go into the grocery store, the stress is palpable. Stressed when the bills come. Stressed when a holiday comes around. Stressed when they go to the grocery store. That's what's actually happening out there right now. People who made their first visit to the food bank this year, these are working people, some of the highest rates in Canada. 2 out of every 5 of those clients visiting the food bank in Saskatchewan are Saskatchewan children. They have absolutely no need for this Premier. Those struggling with substance use, who can't access help, those struggling with mental health, and have to hear platitudes, platitudes, platitudes. There's really very little out there for them, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Folks concerned about the climate crisis. Instead of any signal of action in this throne speech, this government is actually signaling it's preparing to throw more money at losing court battles, while they can't even feed, house, or properly employ the people of this province, let alone invest in our untapped potential in renewable energy, let alone, be a leader, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Folks in the disability support sector who've seen their retention rates go up over 30%. They feel burnt out and underappreciated, and they have less and less need for this Premier, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Working people, whether they're showering before work or after work, they're increasingly doing precarious, outsourced, low-wage work for not enough pay, having to work 2, sometimes 3 jobs. They're exhausted. They're not able to spend time with their kids. Those who are struggling more and more each day. And hear of our windfall provincial revenues. Watch as the Premier boasts about growth, record growth. Meanwhile, we've had a 1% increase in full-time employment in a year. In the last decade. 1% in a year would be okay. Still not great. 1% growth in the last decade, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mortgage delinquency, 10th out of 10 provinces. Minimum wage, 10th out of 10. We're still at the bottom of the barrel. Full-time employment growth, 9th out of 10. Population growth, out-migration. We're among the worst of the worst, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Education workers who've seen cuts to increasingly large and complex classrooms. Meanwhile, they're sick of seeing this government apologize for and fund private education that doesn't even uphold the basic human rights of students. Folks living with disability who haven't seen an increase to their basic income in 7 years. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it's not all good news in Saskatchewan. Folks can't get a doctor, they can't pay their bills, they can't find full-time employment. Many can't get to an open hospital. Many can't find a home. They can't get the help they need. Many children can't find enough to eat. And it's all the more shocking, Mr. Deputy Speaker, because they're right. Saskatchewan does have what the world needs. And Saskatchewan is giving the world what it needs. But the Saskatchewan Party and the Saskatchewan government are not even providing for the people of Saskatchewan. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, because this throne speech falls short of addressing the most pressing issues in this province today, I will certainly not be supporting it. And it is my pleasure to support the amendment moved by the member from Saskatoon Fairview. Hear, hear, hear. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Cyprus. I recognize the member from Estevan. Oh, what is your point of order?
Mike's not on. Mike.
There we go.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The member from Elphinstone Centre stated the hypocrisy of our government. Mr. Speaker, this is clearly unparliamentary language. I reference previous Hansard debates that reference the words hypocrisy, hypocrites, hypocritical, and all of them being ruled unparliamentary. These come from July 8, 1961, February 21st, 1961, June 22nd, 1961, and more recent, April 15th, 2010. Mr. Speaker, the member should stand in her place and apologize.
I hear the point of order well taken. I ask the member to stand up, withdraw your comments and apologize.
I guess I don't get to respond to it today. Mr. Deputy, I apologize and withdraw my comments.
I recognize the member from Cypress Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It is once again an honour and a privilege to enter the Speech from the Throne debate. The Speech from the Throne debate on behalf of the people of Cypress Hills constituency. Thanks to my constituents for the continued support. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to take this opportunity to recognize some of the people that without their help and support, it would not be possible for me to be here today. First and foremost, I want to thank my wife, Phyllis. On Saturday, we celebrated our 40th wedding anniversary, so we got evered by a little bit. And our children, Nicole and Eric. Nicole lives here in Grand Coulee, and she is a teacher. My son, Burton and Audrey, they are both RCMP officers. We just moved to Eastern Canada. They got transferred into Ottawa, and they specialize in the force, and they're living in Gatineau, Quebec, and going to work in Ottawa. And my youngest daughter, Brittany, she has 12 years in the OR, and her husband, Dale, that live in Lethbridge, and she has 12 years in the OR in the hospital there. Their support and their strength that allows me, to serve for the betterment of tomorrow. Mr. Speaker, I would also like to thank my constituency assistant, Sean Checkley. He does an amazing job in the constituency office in Cypress and Gull Lake. Mr. Speaker, our government is committed to doing what it takes to foster and continue the growth of a strong economy. Our economy is seeing growth in agriculture, forestry, oil and gas, and in the potash and uranium sector. Mr. Speaker, our province grew by 6,500 people in the second quarter of this year. By the end of 2022, Mr. Speaker, Saskatchewan will be home to 1.2 million residents. Since forming government in 2007, we were seeing our young people staying home or moving back to our hometowns. This was not a case prior to 2007. It was a complete opposite as generations of our kids and our families moved to other provinces for opportunities. Mr. Speaker, our province's unemployment rate is at 4.1%, which is the lowest in Canada. Our province has 20,500 more people working for the first 9 months than we did in 2021. The province of Saskatchewan also is projected to lead the nation of Canada in growth for 2022. With a strong outlook for the economy, and our government was able to create a 4-point affordable plan. Mr. Speaker, this plan includes the extension of small business tax rate. Our government paid off over $1 billion in operating debt, which will save Saskatchewan residents about $50 million in interest payments. We continued exemption for the fitness and gym memberships, along with other activities from the provincial sales tax. Mr. Speaker, each resident in Saskatchewan 18 years and older will receive a $500 affordable tax credit. As our economy strengthens, Mr. Speaker, all residents of the province should benefit from that growth. It is growth that works for everyone, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, as I toured the constituency of Cypress Hills this summer, the message was clear. Our economy is open for business and supported by our government. Mr. Speaker, earlier this summer, the town of East End saw that optimism. with a new tourism investment into the community. Mr. Speaker, Deputy Speaker, Gary Southgate recognized the opportunity and will be investing in the short line rail tours of this historic scenic Frenchman River Valley. This will not only add to the tourism activity in the town of East End, but will also attract visitors to enter the southwest corner of our province. Gary has purchased 4 locomotives and it has 20 cars relating back to the 1918s that are on the track. And he's investing in a service building that'll be between $2 million of his own financial funding. This will not only add tourism and activity to the town of East End, but it will also attract visitors to enter the corner of our province. The Minister responsible for Parks and Culture and Sports joined me as we toured the newest attraction in the Southwest. Mr. Speaker, the Minister and I met with Mr. Southgate, the Town of East End's Council, and the Great Western Rail, discussing the possible opportunities that will help support their growth and investment in the area. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this approach of working together and supporting each other is why investment is coming to Saskatchewan in record amounts. Mr. Speaker, whether it's investing in the Cypress Hills Provincial Park or the Royal Saskatchewan Museum T-Rex Centre or a host of the attractions in other communities in the southwest Saskatchewan will continue to attract visitors and investments as we grow our economy together. It's growth that works for everyone. Mr. Deputy Speaker, our area is also benefiting from the investment in the helium industry. North American Helium, Royal Helium, and Helium Evolution are some of the few companies growing this industry in southwest Saskatchewan. North American Helium added its 3rd purification plant near the Community Council. Mr. Speaker, it is in addition to the largest purification plant in Canada owned by North American Helium, already operating near Council. Mr. Speaker, Saskatchewan's agriculture and resource sector are not only a pillar of our economy, they are vital to the maintaining a sustainable and a good quality of life for many of our Cypress Hills constituents. Mr. Speaker, our ag producers experienced another challenging year in the Southwest, with much of the moisture falling in scattered showers. One area would see decent yields, and the next area 2 miles away would be dealing with low yields and grasshoppers. Mr. Speaker, our last few months, myself and the Minister of Agriculture met with our producers discussing the challenges some of them are facing. We discussed programs availability to them such as the Farm Ranch Water Infrastructure Program, which allows ranchers to get water to their cattle once dugouts were no longer meeting livestock needs. We changed, Mr. Deputy Speaker. When the meeting with the producers from the Southwest Saskatchewan, the Minister and myself also explained the changes to the agri-stability compensation rate from 70 to 80%. We discussed the increase in the coverage by crop insurance to $405 per acre, which is an increase of 48% from 2021. Mr. Speaker, we also discussed our forage program, rainfall insurance program, for those who had poor forage crops and lack of rain for grazing purposes. Our government also announced changes in supports to the veterinarian and veterinarian tech programs, and also our government increased the number of veterinarian technicians seats by 8 to 32 at the Saskatchewan Polytech. We also increased the number of seats in veterinarians from 20 to 25 in the Western College of Veterinary Medicine and expanded the loan forgiveness program for both veterinarians and veterinarian technicians. Mr. Deputy Speaker, all of these enhancements and supports will help stabilize the recruitment for vets to practice in rural Saskatchewan. Mr. Speaker, producers from across the province, and especially in southwest Saskatchewan, are thankful for our government that listens and supports their needs in industry. when at times other governments do not. I will continue to represent and engage with our producers in the Cypress Hills constituency so that they know there is a voice, voices are heard at that government and is willing to continue to support their needs moving forward. Mr. Speaker, this past summer we committed to engaging with our frontline workers in the healthcare. Mr. Speaker, the rural and remote health minister and myself spent time in the communities of Leader, Maple Creek, and Shaunavon, touring their facilities and speaking with frontline workers, staff and local community leaders on how we can and maintain the services that the communities deserve. The message back was clear, Mr. Speaker. We need more staff. This is why our government announced a new 4-point health human resource plan to recruit, train, and retain healthcare providers and which will add up to 1,000 new health care professionals to facilities across the province. On these tours, Mr. Speaker, we heard that we need 4 more full-time positions. This allows healthcare professionals to move to East End and to be able to have full-time hours and support their families while they start their careers in great communities in rural Saskatchewan. Mr. Speaker, our government converted 150 part-time positions in rural and remote areas across Saskatchewan to permanent full-time positions. Mr. Deputy Speaker, those community leaders we met with this summer, they supported this plan. They supported this government because they are seeing results. In October, Mr. Speaker, the Saskatchewan Health Authority posted 100 new full-time positions, or full-time permanent positions for nurses, continuing care aides, lab and x-ray techs, medical lab assistants, and medical radiation technologists in 49 communities across the province. Once these positions fill, Mr. Speaker, our facilities will be providing sustainable services to their homes and to their home communities. Mr. Speaker, that is growth that works for everyone. Mr. Deputy Speaker, as mentioned before, a priority of mine and our entire government was to engage with our constituents. Whether, Mr. Speaker, it was Dino Days in East End, Boomtown Days in Shaunavon, Wild West Days in Leader, or in the village of Abbey, Riders Celebration Party, constituents wanted to see continued support of infrastructure projects in their hometowns. Mr. Speaker, we attended the Village of Abbey's Rider Celebration Party. The Village of Abbey was the recipient of the Investing in Canada infrastructure program, as well as they received $25,000 grant from Richardson Pioneer that will help with the community pay for a new first-class playground area for the community. Mr. Speaker, there was no better place in Saskatchewan than the community of Abbey to show off their rider pride that day and have the community members come together and celebrate this event with everyone from the area. Mr. Speaker, our government also completed 25 kilometers of highway investment on Highway 37 between the communities of Shaunavon and Gull Lake, with the completion of the Highway 37 through the town of Gull Lake to take place this spring. This investment, Mr. Speaker, allows for safer highways as well as a business corridor to support producers and industry moving grains or products. Mr. Speaker, Richardson's Pioneer Richardson's Pioneer is building a new inland grain terminal in the RMA Gull Lake right along the Trans-Canada Highway. This terminal will be the 3rd inland terminal in the area. Critical infrastructure like a good and safe highways to support the growth of these industries. Earlier this summer, the Southwest Terminal, located east of Gull Lake, celebrated their 25th anniversary. This large-scale event was a historic moment. At one time, people doubted that the terminal in this area would have enough business to be successful. Not only is Southwest Terminal still providing services and growing to serve producers, we are seeing added expansions from different companies in the ag sector. The event was highlighted with the attendance of our Premier, and ag producers and companies saw firsthand our government supporting the government support, with the Premier offering words of support and congratulations to those with the vision, when others believed companies like Southwest Terminal could not be successful in the Southwest. Mr. Speaker, growth and investment is key to building a strong Saskatchewan. And we will continue to support infrastructure projects across the Southwest to ensure a strong economy. This is growth that works for everyone. Mr. Deputy Speaker, our government has also committed to providing better access to high-speed internet through SaskTel's rural fibre plan. Construction of our rural fibre plan has already started in communities of Maple Creek, Shaunavon, and the construction is scheduled to begin in 2023 for the community of Gull Lake. Mr. Speaker, providing this investment of infrastructure will help grow our rural businesses and communities. No longer will businesses be needing to look elsewhere for internet services, as we will be providing them in rural communities across Saskatchewan. Mr. Speaker, again, this is growth that works for everyone. Mr. Speaker, we have a strong working relationship with the Nickenese First Nation. Mr. Deputy Speaker, Nickenese has tremendous vision of working together with their communities and the surrounding communities in the area. This started 40 years ago with the Battle of the Little Big Puck hockey game, with all the proceeds continuing to go to the Southwest Integrated Healthcare Facility for equipment support to the local hospital in Maple Creek. The Nickenese First Nation will soon be breaking ground on the new truck stop located west of Maple Creek along Highway Number 1. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Minister of Highways and myself met with the Nickenese Band members this summer at their proposed truck stop site, ensuring that access for their customers and those traveling the Highway Number 1 were feasible and safe for all. The Nickenese First Nation also recently announced a partnership and a venture to provide telecommunications to their communities and other First Nation communities across the province. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Nickenese will be the first Indigenous community providing telecommunication services in the province. A working together relationship, a strong leadership from both the Nickenese and our government in reconciliation at work. We will continue to support our partners at the Nickenese because I know there is still more to come from forming a successful working together relationship. Mr. Speaker, myself and the Minister of Agriculture were invited to the Truth and Reconciliation Day in Maple Creek. We were invited by the Nickenese elders to take part in the traditional pipe ceremony, the victory dance, as the community of Maple Creek and the Nickenese First Nation raised the Treaty 4 flag, the Town of Maple Creek flag, our national flag, the Métis Nation flag, and our provincial flag. These flags will fly together as an act of recognition, the partnerships we all share. Mr. Deputy Speaker, constituents of Cypress Hills also had opportunity this summer to hear directly from the Premier at the Town Hall meeting event in Maple Creek. The Town Hall allowed constituents an opportunity to ask questions and share thoughts with our government and our government plans. Mr. Speaker, this open dialogue provided positive feedback for our government and for the constituents of Cypress Hills. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the constituents of Cypress Hills support the decisions of protecting our provincial autonomy from the federal government. They expect us as government to protect the infringement that has had a negative impact on our industry and on our industries and each one of our citizens with policies that limit our opportunity for growth. Mr. Speaker, we as government will continue to stand up for Saskatchewan first and allow our constituents an opportunity to grow their communities locally. Mr. Speaker, this summer saw the return of hosting community celebrations. We saw parades, ball tournaments, rodeos, and events, a Guinness World Record event held in Southwest Saskatchewan. Mr. Speaker, I had the great pleasure and opportunity of being asked to be a judge on a continuous floating world record attempt at Lake Pelshey. This event brought hundreds of people together in an attempt to secure this record right here in Southwest Saskatchewan. The day was comprised of an official event as well as a community and lake barbecue celebrating and the accomplishment. The proceeds from the event will help the Regional Park Authority with future projects as well as being recognized at the world level. Mr. Speaker, I am proud to report that the event was a huge success and that the group at Lake Pelshey are positioned to be the new world record holders for a single line of continuous floating objects by the Guinness Book of World Records. Mr. Speaker, this summer, communities across Saskatchewan were filled with excitement. We saw the hometown spirit that makes Saskatchewan a special place to live. Our government committed in this throne speech to safer communities for our residents across Saskatchewan. This summer, myself and the minister responsible for policing and corrections and public safety, along with the minister responsible for parks and culture and sport, worked together to ensure the safety of those visiting the Cypress Hills Park. This summer, the Cypress Hill Provincial Park experienced a series of fires that brought concerns to all of us. Both ministries worked through dry conditions to protect the vast landscape that the park provides. The Minister of Public Safety provided extra resources to the area to help protect and prevent any damage to the area. Staff from different areas were relocated to Cypress Hills and stayed till the risk of fire was brought to a lower level of concern. The minister responsible for the Water Security Agency and myself toured the area by helicopter to see the extent of the fires. We discussed possible solutions of water sources for the park to help aid in events such as the fire threat this year. Mr. Speaker, we will be discussing all these things from equipment upgrades to fire suppression upgrades, as well as working together in agreements to ensure that the safety of all those using and living in the Cypress Hills Park community. Mr. Speaker, we will see new initiatives added to the protection of our communities with the newly announced Marshal Services that will, alongside the RCMP members, providing more protection to our communities. More crime reduction teams will add and bring the total of teams to operating in the province to 9. Our government, Mr. Speaker, has added the Saskatchewan Trafficking Response Team, which will protect our residents from illegal weapons, drugs, and human trafficking. The newly formed Warrant Enforcement Team is actively protecting our communities from high-risk offenders who have outstanding warrants. Our government, Mr. Speaker, will be adding 8 more officers to this team furthering our commitment to protecting our hometowns. Mr. Speaker, I will be supporting the speech from the throne when I will not be supporting the amendment. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Melville Saltcoats.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I appreciate being able to speak on behalf of the constituents of Melville Saltcoats tonight to provide my support to the motion brought forward by the member from Walsh Acres, seconded by the member from Athabasca. And I will not be supporting the amendment proposed by the member from Saskatoon Fairview. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this is the first opportunity that I've had to thank some incredible young people that I had the opportunity to work with in the last couple of years, and they were with the Ministry of Environment. And that's Elias Nelson, who is now the Chief of Staff for Rural and Remote Health, Cole Blatter, who is now the Executive Assistant to the Premier, Sam Sass, who is now Comms in TED, and the infamous Emni El-Tassi, who is probably the best senior admin assistant I believe that this building has right now. Also had the pleasure of working with Mark McLaughlin, the DM, who has now moved to the private sector in BC, and some incredible ADMs, directors, and just some very fine employees that are dedicated and really appreciated their youthful enthusiasm. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'd also like to add to the public condolences that have been made to the communities of James Smith, Cree Nation, and the community of Weldon. And I know I speak for my constituents who are mourning with you. As in such typical fashion, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the residents and the communities in this province have stepped up and found ways to support those communities in those difficult times, whether providing food, financial resources, or just simply prayers to help those communities overcome their tragedies. I'm also absolutely overwhelmed, Mr. Deputy Speaker, by the compassion and caring that has been one of the province's core tenets, I believe, that's been held by the many residents of this province. Mr. Deputy Speaker, last week I was invited by the member from Kenora-Pelly to be at the Regina Airport to meet the 2 humanitarian flights of displaced Ukrainian citizens. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, I would really like to congratulate that member from Kenora-Pelly for his incredible efforts in working with the large number of displaced Ukrainian citizens that we have welcomed to this province. He has put significant energy really into working with officials, volunteer organizations to help coordinate such a smooth process. And although the circumstances for the need for these flights is horrific, the response really is to be commended. The legislative members that joined us, the Minister of Trade and Export, as well as the immigration and career training officials that guided the process, were genuinely proud of our province and its residents for the small part that we do to provide comfort and a safe haven for those that came into our province that night. We saw families repatriated. We met Ukrainian residents who had backgrounds in healthcare, computer technology, website design, truck drivers, business people, and more. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we have communities all through the province providing homes, transportation, furnishings, food and jobs to our guests, and they want to do more. I am very proud of this province, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The member from Kenora-Pelly and the member from Cypress Hills and I went to the International Place today to go to the job fair. Do you know there are over 5,200 jobs listed? And that's not including jobs that are available in Regina and Saskatoon, but 5,200 jobs that are listed on the SaskJobs website, jobs that are available throughout Saskatchewan. That's more than enough growth for everyone. You know, I have great hope for the opportunities that my 2 young grandchildren, Bryn and Tessa, are going to have in the future, Mr. Deputy Speaker, when they are ready to look for a job in this province. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm also very proud of this speech from the throne. It both supports the growth opportunities, enthusiasm of this province, but it really also works on tackling some of the difficult issues that a growing economy faces as well. Mr. Deputy Speaker, although there is so much uncertainty in the world today, we do know one thing, and that is that we have what the world needs, and we have growth that works for everyone. There are 31 essential elements that the federal government has deemed to be, well, essential to the well-being of the world, and Saskatchewan has 23 of them. We have the traditional potash, uranium, helium, and now lithium, but we also have copper and rare earth elements like cerium, lanthanum, praseodymium, and neodymium. I don't even think those are on the periodic table when I went to school. But we have so many exciting opportunities ahead for mineral exploration and development in this province, and the innovation that's being utilized and proposed is absolutely incredible. From the development of the world's first carbon-neutral copper mine by Foran Mining in Creighton to the first of its kind in North America, vertically integrated rare earth processing facility developed by the Sask Research Council in conjunction with Vital Metals in Saskatoon. This facility is going to showcase Saskatchewan as a continental hub for value-added rare earth products, and it also sends a clear message that Canada can provide global markets with the essential building blocks for a low-carbon future. Mr. Deputy Speaker, Saskatchewan is going to continue to play a critical role in contributing to the world's value chain of clean energy and food security. These examples are in addition, really, to the huge potash investments that Nutrien and Mosaic have made in our constituency and what BHP is undertaking in the province, supporting local Melville Saltcoats companies like SaskPro, QHIA FabTech, Parkland Manufacturing, and Noble. The world's largest uranium producer, Cameco, is headquartered in Saskatoon, just announced a huge business expansion partnering with Brookfield Renewable Partners to purchase Westinghouse Electric Company. And this potentially becomes a very big deal for Saskatchewan. Apart from Cameco being one of Canada's largest employer of an Indigenous workforce, the majority located in northern Saskatchewan, its corporate head office is located in Saskatoon. This new purchase has the potential to bring affordable energy to northern communities, mine sites, and so many undeveloped regions of the world. It's predicted that where eVinci microreactors can replace diesel power at a mine site or a remote community, carbon emissions would be reduced by 90%. This further exemplifies the innovation and ingenuity that the private sector has implemented to support reducing emissions through their operations. Mr. Deputy Speaker, our oil and gas sectors utilize that same innovation throughout their extraction and refining process. In 2021, greenhouse gas emissions from vented and flared gas at upstream oil facilities in Saskatchewan totaled 4.4 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. This represents a 60% reduction from 2015 levels and a 15% reduction from 2020 levels. Our previous Energy and Resources Minister has said Saskatchewan's comprehensive regulations target both methane from venting and carbon dioxide from flaring. This is far more comprehensive than the federal approach, which targets only methane emissions. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it's processes and rationale such as that has encouraged us to draw the line with the federal government and develop legislation that defends that line. We're poised for incredible economic growth in this province that will support everyone. But we have found that we need to defend Saskatchewan's economy, jobs, and future from constitutional overreach by the federal government. And I think the member from Athabasca simply and eloquently stated in his reply on Thursday, and I quote, "So when we talk about our industry, when we talk about our resources, isn't it right that we protect it for us as we contribute to the world?" End of quote. Mr. Speaker, Deputy Speaker, I'm continually bewildered by our lack of understanding by our federal government, or better yet, their disdain for our oil and gas sector. When a socialist-led government of Norway gets it, I do not know how that defines our current federal government. The country of Norway, who is in the world's top 15 for oil production, is the 10th largest exporter of oil in the world, is continuing to expand their oil and gas exploration and development. Their industry also benefits from a reputation for being one of the world's least carbon-intensive producers of oil and gas, much like Saskatchewan and Alberta. Norway is seen as a testing ground for low-carbon technologies, such as the Northern Lights carbon capture and storage project, in which Shell and France's Total Energy are partners. Saskatchewan oil producers and processors are also huge carbon capture and utilization specialists, especially using CO2 for enhanced oil recovery, such as that found at the Whitecap site at Weyburn, and the proposed carbon storage by FCL in Regina and Cenovus in Lloydminster. It's interesting to note that the Norwegian government just recently stated that it planned to develop, not phase out, oil operations. The Norwegian Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Store stated last year, if we were to say from one day to the other that we close down production from the Norwegian shelf, I believe that would put a stop to an industrial transition that is needed to succeed in the momentum towards net zero. So we're about to transition, we're about to develop and transition, not close down. Mr. Deputy Speaker, that is a socialist government. They get it. The counter rationale espoused by our federal government has motivated our government to ensure that we are looking after Saskatchewan first. Sorry, that was quite a little oil and gas rant by a member who usually talks about ag and potash, but it's important to this province. But we all benefit from a robust resource economy. If we have the revenue, we can pay for the services that we know that we need in our province, whether it's mental health and addictions, improved urban and rural health services, maybe improvements to affordability. They all come from a healthy economy. And I'm proud once again to support our finance minister as she announced an unscheduled $1 billion debt repayment and also laid out a plan to balance the budget 4 years earlier than anticipated. These announcements are going to support growth that works for everyone. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the Melville-Saltcoats constituents for their support and encouragement as we were winding our way through, I think, some unprecedented times. I so encouraged a couple of weeks ago as I spoke to a young father in Melville whose infant had some serious health issues. He could not thank us enough for the incredible care and consultation that he had with all the professional health care employees that he and his family met at the Jim Pattison Children's Hospital in Saskatoon. I was encouraged by a young lady who's currently going through the U of S medicine program who wants to specialize in pediatric medicine and can't wait to practice in this province. Or the number of residents who've reached out, thankful that they've received their surgery dates or have had surgery even earlier than they expected. Or the hospital manager who was extremely thankful that she was able to fill some critical positions by being given the opportunity to offer a full-time position versus part-time as had been traditionally offered. Mr. Deputy Speaker, healthcare in this province isn't fixed yet. The perfect system that the opposition is yet to define is likely unattainable, but we are on the right track. The 4-point Health Human Resources Action Plan that was announced in September is already paying dividends in the constituency of Melville-Saltcoats, in that our 2 healthcare facilities are going to benefit from very soon, which I know our residents are going to be extremely relieved to hear. Mr. Deputy Speaker, there are so many reasons to be optimistic about the blessings that God has given this great province, and I look forward to doing my small part to ensure that we will continue to support the growth that works for everyone. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
I recognize the member from Regina Douglas Park.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, it's my honour to rise tonight and enter into the debate around the throne speech. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to take this opportunity at first to as many members have done as well, thank my family for allowing me to do the work that we all need to do here in this House as legislators. We all have very busy schedules, and often the work at home, especially during session, fall on our loved ones, be it spouses, partners, extended family members who sort of help fill in the gaps that are created by us being busy here in the chamber, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And I want to take this opportunity to first thank my spouse, Jared, for all that he does in helping to carry the load of watching our 2 kiddos, who are now 3 and 18 months. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, they get busier and busier every single day. It seems it's pretty wonderful to watch them grow and how quickly they progress in their development. The 18-month-old in particular is right at that point where he's really starting to become conscious of what's going on around him, and it's pretty remarkable. It's been making for more difficult bedtimes and evenings, Mr. Deputy Speaker, because he's now aware of the fact that we're gone and he wants us there, and it's resulted in some sleepless nights, Mr. Deputy Speaker, but it's all worth it. And I wanted to take this moment to thank the person who's putting those kids to bed tonight while I'm away, and who often has to put those kids to bed Mr. Deputy Speaker, while I'm away, and that's my partner, who's very busy in his own profession, in his own right, and we do what we can to support each other in our personal and career passions and goals, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I'm very lucky to have a partner like that to walk beside with in this journey of life. I also want to take this opportunity to welcome our new member, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the member from Meewasin, who gave what I thought was a very great maiden speech, his response to the throne speech this afternoon. I think he's an incredible addition to not just this team, but to this chamber in particular. Mr. Deputy Speaker, he comes to this role with a level of enthusiasm and optimism and excitement, with which I have to admit, Mr. Deputy Speaker, only being here for 6 years, I can't say that every day I'm walking in with the exact same level that the member has, but boy, it sure is. It sure boosts those around you when someone like the member for Meewasin comes in and has that level of excitement and energy and positive attitude, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It's such a great addition to have him to the team. It's been great getting to know him so far. I think most who have gotten to know him have nothing but nice things to say about him, and I'm excited to see how he takes on the role and the challenge of being an MLA and being a representative to his constituency. And I know he will absolutely rise and has risen to the task. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I also wanted to take the opportunity to acknowledge two very tragic, but one in particular tragic incidents that have happened over the past 2 months. The first was the death of the Queen, and as everybody else, almost everybody else here, I believe, have only known one monarch. It's quite jarring to see that transition and to see her pass on. It's going to happen, and then when it does, it's still a bit surprising. And we've talked about this actually over the past 6 years since I've been a legislator, in various iterations in legislative amendments when we're talking about succession and things moving from Queen's Bench to King's Bench and the like. We've sort of skirted. I think I've, frankly, Mr. Deputy Speaker, run afoul of some parliamentary what's in order in speaking about the death of the Queen in terms of legislative amendments, in the fact that you're not supposed to talk about it. Not that I was saying anything bad about the Queen, absolutely not. But just to be clear, you still, even talking about it, having it actually happen is still a bit of a jarring event for everybody, and it left everybody with a moment of pause. But in particular, I wanted to take the opportunity to recognize and acknowledge what has been a horrific tragedy that has occurred in Saskatchewan with the mass massacre that happened at James Smith Cree Nation in Walden, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Truly an unspeakable act that had happened. I don't think anybody can claim to understand what it's like to be a member of that community, what it's like to be a member of, to be a survivor of a loved one who had passed on, other than those who have experienced it. And my heart goes out to all of those who were affected by this horrific tragedy. I want to acknowledge everybody who has gone to the aid of that community, publicly or privately, Mr. Deputy Speaker, shown what Saskatchewan is truly great at, I do believe, Mr. Deputy Speaker, which is opening our hearts and our doors and our hands to those who need it in this province in times of desperate need, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And I hope we don't forget that community. I know that there will be, for example, a public inquiry that will occur at some point into what happened, but I hope in all of this we don't forget those folks who will be mourning for a very, very long time and who will be affected by this tragedy, Mr. Speaker. Moving on to the throne speech, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it's not a throne speech that I can support, that the members on this side of the House can support, because it really truly falls short on addressing what are the most pressing issues facing Saskatchewan residents today, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We're living in a time of unprecedented pressures on the wallets of the people of this province. We're really going through an affordability crisis, Mr. Deputy Speaker, with the rising rates of utilities, mortgage arrears going up. Mr. Deputy Speaker, my colleague, the member from Regina Elphinstone, spoke about this the other day, the rising rates of food bank usage, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and the fact that so many of those who are using our food bank today are children is something that we can absolutely not be proud of, and this government cannot say that this is growth that works for everyone, Mr. Deputy Speaker, when Saskatchewan has such a high rate of children having to access food banks. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, at a time when this government is seeing unprecedented windfall revenues, they did nothing to help these folks, help their pocketbooks help their wallets get a little bit more easier to help afford for what they're trying to go through. Sorry, Mr. Deputy Speaker, some words are escaping me right now. Past 9 o'clock, the brain starts to shut down a bit. But really, Mr. Deputy Speaker, this government had some choices that they could have made during this throne speech that could have actually helped address the affordability crisis. They could have rolled back the taxes and fee hikes that they announced last budget. They've already applauding themselves for choosing not to put forward a tax that they were going to announce, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that really impacts the people of the province. It really impacts families. Every single one of these taxes and fee hikes affect everyday people, and it could have been a decision that this government made, especially at this time when they're truly seeing unprecedented windfall resource revenues, Mr. Deputy Speaker, yet we saw nothing about that in this throne speech, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Instead, what we saw was an announcement they were going to kill 350 jobs, putting 350 people, hardworking Saskatchewan residents who work all throughout this province, out of work. And they made this announcement before Christmas, Mr. Deputy Speaker. What they wanted to talk about instead, Mr. Deputy Speaker, was their white paper, their product, that creation outside of the creation of their work this summer. Well, our leader, the leader of the opposition, was touring this province, meeting with every single person she possibly could, leaving no call unanswered. Didn't matter who you voted for in the past. She was talking to you, and she was going into every room, comfortable or not, and talking to the residents of this province, doing the work that we're supposed to be doing. Well, at the same time, this Premier was holding closed-door, invite-only sovereignty meetings, and the result of that was this white paper. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, I could speak to the contents of the white paper, but the problem is it's not much different from the Sask Party. It's not much different from this throne speech, it's lacking in substance, it's full of hot air, and it doesn't actually help the people in this province. But I couldn't say it quite as well as Howard Anglin said it in one of his series of articles, series of comments about how just embarrassing this white paper truly is. He said, and this is my favorite of several quotes, I'm just going to say this one. He said, quote, "Drawing the line, the white paper, is a new low in political communications in Canada. It is doubtful that any government in the history of Confederation, federal, provincial, or municipal, has published something so badly written. My first thought was that an early and unedited draft had been posted prematurely, but after almost a week it has not been replaced. The text is not so much spoiled by errors as composed of them, and the run-on sentences meander more than the South Saskatchewan River." End quote. Mr. Deputy Speaker, that is a damning quote. And that wasn't from, you know, your traditional New Democrat, someone who is clearly partisan and had no... Well, he's quite partisan, that's a good point, but he's not someone that's normally, you know, singing the praises of the NDP. He's actually, right, Stephen Harper's former Deputy Chief of Staff. And what do we see in this throne speech, Mr. Deputy Speaker? We see this government taking a tough on crime agenda. Mr. Deputy Speaker, well, you know, it's hard to take this government seriously about being tough on crime when they invite wife killers to the throne speech, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And we've talked about this at length, and my colleagues have talked about this at length. We've talked about what a horrible decision that was. We've talked about what message that sent to survivors of intimate partner violence, to those families and loved ones who have lost those that they care about to intimate partner violence. Mr. Deputy Speaker, but what it really shows, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is that tough on crime only means some things for some sorts of crime. What we see in the throne speech is an announcement that this government is putting forward Saskatchewan's Marshals Service, a word that doesn't actually, that's an American term, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Marshals don't exist in Canada, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And what it really is another step forward toward this government's plan for a provincial police force. We've seen this happen in a few different areas already. We've seen the addition of powers for conservation officers and highway traffic officers. We saw what happened with Bill 70. We've seen this government take more and more independence away from policing and put it in their own hands, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And now we're seeing the final culmination of that work with the Saskatchewan Marshals Service, Mr. Deputy Speaker. There are members on that side who are former officers. There are members who've worked on that side who have worked in the legal field. You would think that they would be concerned about the erosion of police independence. You'd think that they'd be concerned about government intrusion, and they'd understand and respect the need for the division between those two bodies and why it gets so dangerous when you start to walk across that line, Mr. Deputy Speaker. You'd think that they would be worried about every single time they start to butt against the rule of law, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and what happens to a society when that breaks down, Mr. Deputy Speaker. You'd think that they'd be concerned about other jurisdictions who have done cost-benefit analysis of provincial police forces, like Alberta, and found that it's going to cost more money than the current system, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and that it's actually not worth it to go forward. The throne speech also announces the reopening of the Weyburn King's Bench Courthouse and the Lloydminster Provincial Courthouse. Now, those were two courthouse closures that we spoke up against. We welcome and we're glad to see the government roll back their wrong decision to close those two courthouses. I want to take this opportunity, Mr. Deputy Speaker, not to thank the government, but to thank those who spoke up against these closures. The Bar Association for Lloydminster, the Bar Association for North Battleford, the Bar Association for Weyburn, and the Bar Association for Estevan, and all of those who work in those legal communities for speaking up against the impediment to access to justice that these closures created. Now, the Weyburn Courthouse was closed prior to 2020. The Lloydminster Courthouse closure was more recent. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this summer I had the opportunity to go up to Lloydminster and meet with members of that bar association to speak with them about the impact that this closure was having on the community that they serve. Mr. Deputy Speaker, Weyburn, I had the opportunity to do that a few years back when that was originally announced. I believe that was in 2017, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And I wanted to give a shout out to one lawyer from Weyburn in particular, my friend Bill Holliday. I had the opportunity to meet him first when we were both serving on the board for Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers together. Now, my friends always like to tease me about the name of that organization, and that's fair, but they did good work. It was important work that they did. They managed the mental health supports programs for lawyers and articling students in the province. And the current president of the Law Society was a president of that board. That's when I first met him and James Corpin, and Bill Holliday was also involved in that board, and that's when I had the opportunity to meet Bill. And Bill and I have talked often throughout the years since we left that board together. Mostly he would touch in with his thoughts on politics, and in particular he was quite vocally opposed to the Weyburn courthouse closure, and we would chat about that a lot and work together on some advocacy around that. Sadly, Bill passed away during COVID, so he's not around to see the courthouse reopen. So I wanted to give a special shout out to Bill, because I know he would be happy to see this this wrong decision finally reversed, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I miss him often. I think about him a lot. I was talking to his law partner the other day, and he was a great guy. He was really fun to get to know, and it's always sad when you lose someone like that, and I think about him quite often. And was really, when I saw that announcement in the throne speech, he was the first person I thought of. I want to close my remarks on one particular comment, and it's come up a few times, and in particular, it's when members opposite say that we hate Saskatchewan, that we don't love Saskatchewan, that we don't support Saskatchewan. I can't believe I have to say this, Mr. Deputy Speaker, but of course we love Saskatchewan. I don't think any person in this chamber doesn't love this province, doesn't care about this province, doesn't want to see our families stay in this province and thrive in this province, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And it particularly came from the member from Kelvington-Wadena, and I've got a soft spot in my heart, Mr. Deputy Speaker, for the member from Kelvington-Wadena. My first kiss was with a boy from Quill Lake, so I'll always have a soft spot in my heart for that end of the province, Mr. Deputy Speaker. But I wish he and other members would drop that rhetoric, Mr. Deputy Speaker, because we all love Saskatchewan. We all want to see Saskatchewan thrive. What doesn't help is when we make international headlines for the wrong things, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So we ask this government to quit making international headlines for the wrong reasons, because it doesn't help our economy, it doesn't help us recruit families to Saskatchewan, it doesn't help us recruit doctors to this province. Mr. Deputy Speaker, with that, I think I'll conclude my remarks. I will not be supporting the throne speech, but I will be supporting the amendment from my colleague, the member from Saskatoon Fairview.
Oh, I recognize the member from Prince Albert, Northcote.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It's an honour for me to rise in this House this evening to stand before you in support of the throne speech.
You're here.
I would like to begin, though, by offering my condolences to the families and residents of James Smith Cree Nation and the village of Weldon, who suffered unspeakable loss and tragedy this past September. I had the honour of accompanying PAGC Urban Services team and volunteers out to the James Smith community to deliver donations and foods. And I also was able to attend a number of local vigils to honour the victims and their families. You know, and I got to see firsthand how these communities rallied in support of the families and the communities. And I offer my thoughts and prayers to these families as they continue their healing journey. This fall also saw the loss of a very, very remarkable woman, and we mourn the loss of Queen Elizabeth II, the world's longest reigning monarch. Her selfless public service and commitment to truth and reconciliation was an extraordinary contribution to our country. And Queen Elizabeth's last act before her passing was to send a message of condolence to the families and the community of James Smith Cree Nation. And as members before me have said, there are many people who help us on this journey when we choose to enter into public service. And I too wish to thank my family and friends for their love and support. And that love and support helps guide and carry me as I do the very best that I can do in this role for the people of PA Northcote and for our province. My son Rob is a great support for me. He keeps me on track, gives me a little advice now and again, and he cooks, too often for me, I think, and helps me in many other ways. And also my Calgary family, Jason, Brandy, Gus and Fawn. I don't get to see them very often anymore. I can count the times on one hand, I think, since before COVID, since I've actually seen them. And, you know, I thank them for their patience, and I'm very grateful for FaceTime. It's a wonderful convenience. There's no hugs, but at least I can see their faces. And I also thank my youngest son, Cody, and his girlfriend, Tana, too, as well. I was a regular fixture, and maybe it's a good thing I'm not anymore. So thank you. Your support is always appreciated. And people who are very important to me are Lorinda, Sylvia, and Marge. My mom's on her own now, and I don't get to see her as much as I like to. So I really thank them for watching out for my mom and keeping me updated so I can follow up on things I need to do. And Andrew for continuing to be my friend. And I would be remiss if I did not say thank you to my constituency assistant, Pat. She really makes my job a lot easier. I know when I'm away, everything's going to be looked after, and Pat does amazing casework. We are an extremely busy office, and Pat, anyone who stops into the office or who calls is treated with the kindness and respect that they deserve. Thank you to my colleagues, to the Premier, for the hard work and endless hours that they spend making this the very best place in Canada to live. And also, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'd like to thank the people and businesses and organizations in Prince Albert for their efforts, for their hard work and fundraising, their volunteerism, their donations, and their compassion that helps lead to the wonderful place in our city. There have been many fundraising events in Prince Albert with thousands of dollars raised for local charities and organizations. and I would like to acknowledge these organizers and volunteers. And I'd like to give a shout out to Sophie's Closet. So Sophie's Closet was established to distribute donations of housewares, bedding, furniture, toys, and clothing to Ukraine newcomers in Prince Albert. They also connect to our newcomers, other newcomers, with employers for future job opportunities. So, Mr. Speaker, while the world is experiencing turmoil and uncertainty, it's a really exciting time for our province. Saskatchewan has what this world needs. You've heard this before: the food, the fuel, and the fertilizer. Our province is growing, and our economy is strong. In the second quarter of this year, our province's population increased by 6,500 people, who now call Saskatchewan home. At this rate, we are projected to reach 1.2 million people before the end of 2022. Mr. Speaker, Saskatchewan is also projected to lead this country in economic growth this year. Investments in our resource sector is creating thousands of jobs in Saskatchewan. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I had the opportunity to attend the Saskatchewan Real Estate Conference here a couple weeks ago, where the primary speaker was Dr. Mike Lindhelm, the national head of RBC Residential Mortgages. And he had a great deal to say about where Saskatchewan is and what a strong position we are in. In fact, he said, not only are we projected to lead the nation in economic growth this year, he said, and not the next year, but for the next 3 years is what he is predicting. Saskatchewan Potash reached their 2030 growth plan target in July of this year, with sales of $9 billion, and have set new projected highs for 2030. The $15 billion BHP Jansen mine investment will be the largest single investment in the history of our province. Mr. Speaker, demands for oil and rare earth minerals are increasing worldwide. Vital Metals announced a $20 million development of rare earth processing facility with Saskatchewan Research Council. This will be a first of its kind in North America. The forest industry is generating $1.8 billion in investment over the next 3 years, with expanded and new mill projects. This is very exciting for northern Saskatchewan and extremely exciting for Prince Albert. Prince Albert was a one-industry town at the time of the closing of the Weyerhaeuser pulp mill in 2016, and Prince Albert and the surrounding communities were hit very hard by this. 700 direct jobs and 1,000 indirect jobs were lost as a result of this closure, and this loss was felt for years. And you can still see the effect on our city today. There's high levels of crime and addictions, unemployment, and people who lacked hope. The opening of the Paper Excellent and One Sky forest products is welcome and exciting news for the entire city of Prince Albert, our trading area, and our northern communities. These investments will bring jobs to Prince Albert and surrounding area, prosperity to our business sector. You can already feel the excitement as business owners relocate to the city, and city developers are starting developments underway in the south end of the city. Forestry is northern Saskatchewan's largest sector, supporting families and northern communities with nearly 8,000 jobs and another 2,600 on the way, with $1 billion in planned capital investments. Last year, Saskatchewan had a record $1.8 billion in forestry sales. And Indigenous people make up more than 27% of Saskatchewan's total forestry sector workforce, the highest percentage in any province. Additionally, 30% of the provincial timber supply is allocated to Indigenous businesses, also the highest of any province. Mr. Speaker, I consistently meet with constituents who have concerns or ideas and bring them forward to the appropriate ministers. And this year, with COVID restrictions being lifted, I had the opportunity to attend many events in the community and speak to a number of constituents. People were happy with the improvement they've seen in our province. In fact, a lot of them made comments that they were surprised to see me because it's not an election year. We also discussed access to health care, affordability, crime, and mental health and addictions. And Mr. Speaker, this throne speech speaks to these areas. Our government announced a $60 million four-point health human resources action plan to recruit, train, incentivize, and retain our healthcare providers. It is a good plan, I agree. This is the first initiative of its kind in this country. And other provinces are looking at potentially imitating this plan. This plan is important because we have to remember recruitment to healthcare for any professionals is a very competitive business. We're competing with the world, Mr. Speaker. We're competing with other provinces. We're competing with the states. People need to want to come here, Mr. Speaker. Our four-point health human services resource plan will help with recruitment, training, incentives, and retention for healthcare workers and professionals within Prince Albert and our province. This is one of arguably the most robust.
Now the time is being 10:30 p.m. This House stay adjourned until 1:30 p.m. tomorrow.